Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito today. Welcome. 773-763-9278 is our number. It's a holiday weekend, so I have no doubt whatsoever that you'll have some questions for yours truly at some point, covering the myriad of topics that we will deal with today. Now, right out of the gate, if I may, there are a couple of things that have, I guess, consistently stuck in the craw of the Republican Party over the last, I don't know, post-Trump years. And that would be not the alleged Biden crime family selling, I guess, changes in policy that were already going to happen. A stroke of business genius by the Bidens that stuns even the most business savvy amongst us. Yes, how in the world can you sell wet water to someone? How do you sell rocks that are hard? How do you sell the sky that is above us? Sell tickets to see the sky. That's essentially the argument that the Republicans were doing, that the Bidens figured out a way to sell tickets to people to see the sky. And if you pay them extra, it will get dark half the time. That's the business plan that Republicans seem to think, because in the case of Alexander Shokin, the prosecutor that was fired who worked in Ukraine, allegedly at the instruction of Joe Biden, this was also something that while Joe Biden had been sent there by the administration, the Congress of the United States, and basically every other thinking person in our government, and you can debate how many of those are amongst yourselves, not an issue. And then, of course, the IMF, which was going to withhold not $1 billion, but $70 billion in direct aid if this guy wasn't fired and if they didn't do something about corruption. This was one of the major steps. And then, of course, the fact that the guy gets fired and the guy that replaces him is the one who actually prosecutes the head of Burisma who fled the country. End of story. So, and the former guy now, I guess, lives in Russia under the protection of Vladimir Putin for whatever that's worth. But apparently, again, the idea is that the Biden crime family has figured out a way to, I guess, the most criminal analogy I could use for them at this point in the minds of the Republican Party, and this is even going farther than I think is normal or warranted, would be Colonel Tom Parker. If you saw the recent Elvis movie, the snowman himself, that he was able to sell you stuff that wasn't there, show you things you never saw, and make you pay for it. And that's the idea with the Bidens. They somehow managed to get China to pay them billions of dollars that don't show up magically in their bank account, but then I guess that's par for the course with Chinese billions these days. And by doing that, they convinced Biden to form the AUKUS agreement, give nuclear-powered submarines to Australia to help Taiwan defend itself, and in that case, help re-up Japan's defensive capabilities for the exact same reason, reignite the Quad, and effectively create a workaround that reinvigorates the TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was meant to be an economic bulwark against the Chinese industrial hegemony in the entire, in all of Asia, quite frankly. And apparently, the Chinese wanted to be set back 10 to maybe 15, perhaps forever, in their technological advancements. They wanted their economy to completely crater in less than 2 years, and they wanted Joe Biden to be the guy to do it. So they paid him lots of money when he wasn't vice president and wasn't planning on running to get this plan in order. I know it's fifth dimension chess, so we've yet to figure that part of it out. But one of the other things that keeps coming up, especially in the last little bit, is what we'd call Bidenomics. Joe Biden is now running on Bidenomics, and then instead of letting it become a punchline like Obamacare, which eventually, by the way, is more popular. You know, it started out as unpopular because they were tagging the ACA to Obama and using the fact that there were a bunch of disgruntled people who were like, I don't like half of that guy for reasons I can't say in public, who now apparently feel like they can say it in public. In that case, they thought tagging the ACA with Obamacare would be a negative, and it did work initially. But over time, as the ACA has become more popular, the way it's spoken of is not that the ACA has become more popular, but that indeed Obamacare has become more popular and will continue to be so as long as it's able to be stabilized and being allowed to function. And boy, I got news for them. If they ever get a chance to add a public option to that, and again, the magic word being option, we are America after all, by adding that public option where private companies have to compete with the public company in the same way that private security, and we have private security and police officers, we have public school and private school, we have state and public universities and private universities, colleges. Everywhere else, they don't seem to have a problem competing. Why is insurance somehow off the table? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of murky money that is based on actuarials, and that ultimately the whole game is how much return can you deny after the fact when the person is up against the wall, and it's not like any other product. Healthcare is like that. Healthcare is like no other product, and that when you're most desperate for it, it's what are you going to do? Not leverage your house? That's how the game has always been run. And so finding some way to hedge against that if somebody wants to bet the house on a new treatment or something extraordinary, they have the right to do that, but they shouldn't have to. Is the idea. Since we have all these, I suppose you can hire Blackwater if you want to defend your trademarks and your oil and your shipping routes all over the world, but the Navy's doing it already. So is that corporate welfare? All right, we'll get into that later. But the important thing is that one of the stories that's been coming out during the Biden years, interestingly enough, and as we know this, Democrats, and by the way, again, I'm Hal Sparks filling in for Joan Esposito today, if this voice sounds slightly different. 773-763-9278 is our number. And we, of course, welcome trolls as they want into our chat room at infotainmentwars.com, and of course at twitch.tv/halsparks. You'll find a strangely welcoming home where as long as you don't use racial epithets or any kind of vitriolic language, and you could just be stupid using a broader vocabulary than you would normally use, you're welcome to be here. And of course, same thing with callers, I suppose. One of the things that that people have been talking about over the last little bit, and it's been a point of contention across the political spectrum, it would seem, because everything is big tech until it's on your side, everything is big business until it's on your side, everything is big pharma, is big whatever. That the billionaires have added $852 billion in net worth, from Elon Musk to Bernard Arnault to Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Larry Ellison, and Steve Ballmer. They've added the most. This is the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, that the world's 500 richest people, across 500 people, added $852 billion to their fortunes in the first half of 2023. Not in the last 2.5 years, not in the last 10. In the last 6 months across those folks. Now, is it liquid? No. Is it spread across businesses? Yes. Is it through the accumulation of businesses? Yes. Have some of them actually lost more business than they gained in that, for example, Elon Musk has gained $96 billion in the last 6 months in his net wealth. Largely due to the fact that he lost 130 of it last year. So he's still down 30 some odd billion dollars this year in the last 12 months. But in the last 6 months, it's buoyed up. Now, that said, U.S. households, the current U.S. households in general, the rest of us, as it were, have added $3.05 trillion in net worth just in the first 3 months of this year. The household sector in this country is now at 168 trillion, 0.5, excuse me, I don't want to leave that out, trillion dollars, where liabilities, what people owe in terms of debt across the country, is somewhere in the order of, on average, by the way, and this is against your house, against your car, and that kind of stuff, has risen 23 billion to 23 billion, rose 23 billion to 19 trillion. So household sector's worth 168 trillion. Household sector owes 19 trillion. Household net worth at about $148 trillion in the United States. A $26 trillion economy on the average. And that has increased by 3 trillion. That increased by 3 trillion just in the first 3 months this year. It is the fourth, in the fourth quarter of 2022, the last 3 months of last year, it rose 2%, ultimately hitting that 147 trillion. And overall, the average debt carried by the average American has lessened and lessened over the last, 10 years in general, but definitely in the last 2 years specifically. And a lot of that had to do with the first sort of personal bailout that Americans have gotten in terms of the rescue package and some of the support given during COVID. And, that, by the way, Republicans can't decide how they feel about it. Trump wants to pat himself on the back for vaccines and for lockdowns and for the money that Democrats doled out to the average household, and yet they want to run against it at the same time. Now, when it comes to student debt, obviously the big story last week was that the Biden plan to give people relief against their student debt was shot down by the Supreme Court, that they didn't have the ability to modify a particular act to use that money. They didn't have the discretion to do that. Now, the reason they needed to use discretion to do that is because we as Democrats have an aversion to a full house for some reason. I don't know what it is, but we love everything to be on a knife's edge. We love a 50-50 Senate and a, 50.49, 49-35, whatever it is, mid 36 House, instead of committing to a long decade, a decades-long approach, likened to what the Republicans have done with the Supreme Court, and using that in a legislative sense, where time and time again, by hook or by crook, we push the best available Democrat that can get the widest amount of support, that votes even 80% of the time with us, is plenty to make the kind of incremental change. And yet somehow we have an aversion to that. We just feel like we'll build sound castles, and then every 8 years or so, we'll let somebody kick them over. It's a very strange habit, and I hope we break it. We'll be back right after this. It's Hal Sparks filling in for Joan Esposito on WCPT. It's WCPT820.com is the website. We'll be back right after this.
You're clear.
Thank you. You can send the transition music my way if you want, Chicago, just so I know when.
There's never like outro music, but
Okay.
there's always there's the rejoins.
Okay, great. Great. Excellent. Thank you.
Short break. We're back in like 20 seconds.
Excellent. And hi, chat room.
We have 2 callers if you want to go to that.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I gotta fit it. Do you see in the video thing where I am? There's a little
Like a chat.
Yes, there's a chat. You can type in there. You can put callers in there if you want, and that will be a way I can call for them, and that makes it easy.
Joan Esposito
Cool. I'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
on WCPT 820.
Welcome back. So the question about student loan debt was always an issue, and Biden, under pressure from a large section of the Democratic base going into the midterms, for fear that there was going to be a red wave, and that for some reason a particular block of Republicans, of Democrats that are what would be the Sanders Democrats, if at all. And again, Bernie Sanders is an independent, we know this, but put that aside for just 1 second. That there was a section of those that said, if you don't do something about my student loan debt, or at least be seen to be doing something about my student loan debt immediately, and if you certainly make me start having to pay it back, I am going to throw a woman's right to choose out the window. There is no way I will allow for a mandate big enough to turn that around. My own personal debt, that I have acquired through my own choices, I will use that as leverage against women who weren't born choosing their sex, but apparently are on the receiving end of some of life's bigger challenges simply because of that situation. But the folks that took on student debt in particular as a pack were wagging their finger at the Biden administration in particular to do something. And this is not unlike what happened with DACA, where instead of putting pressure on the legislature and forming a long-term plan, they just decided we're going to put pressure on the Obama Biden administration. If they don't do something about it, we're gonna do the same thing. We're going to hand over the legislature or the power of the government to Republicans, and we'll show you. Never mind the fact that Donald Trump at that time was running on women should be punished if they get an abortion. There should be some form of punishment, effectively charging women with manslaughter is what he's talking about. And there was a large swath of the electorate that is allegedly on our side of the aisle, allegedly Democratic, allegedly liberal, allegedly progressive, allegedly whatever their name is, whatever they're labeling themselves, that said, I don't care about that. If I don't get what I want in the time scale that I want immediately, I'm going to hand this whole mess over to them. Whether, by the way, and this is the ultimate part, and this is what occurred last week with the SCOTUS. And ultimately, it resulted in the SCOTUS being handed over to a person like Donald Trump. That's the irony of this particular instance, is that it is abundantly clear that if we had a different SCOTUS, they would not have taken this case and would not have, this ruling would not have happened, certainly not in the way that it did. And if they did rule against, say, affirmative action or against, the other cases that came up in front of them, they would have been far more balanced, even if they leaned in the direction that they went, and they would have created, an off-ramp in these circumstances, as opposed to simply just cutting it off and, at the root. So that particular group of people said, if we don't get everything, nobody gets anything, and we will take our votes and go home, and we're going to hold your feet to the fire. Another torture analogy that I don't understand, and I find grotesque. And ultimately, what happened? They created a system where the DACA recipients, instead of having legislation that protects them, walked out into the sunshine after something that Obama signed, and have had Republicans inching their way back towards power, including the time that Trump was in there, trying to dismantle it while these people had already exposed themselves. Now that we know who they are and they've come out into the daylight, much like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, you're asking these people as toothpaste to crawl back into the tube and hide when they cannot. They are now out in the open. They are now known to the government. They are living openly among us. And Donald Trump himself is running on not just getting rid of them, but the biggest push to oust people, undocumented people in the country, period, in our history. The idea is that he's going to roll in and they're going to forcibly eject 11 million people. They're going to go door to door checking papers. And he's running openly on this. This is the plan, heavily supported by a big chunk of his voters. Now, by all Republicans? Absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, it may ultimately be one of the things that torpedoes his chances at actually being president. This is one of the things that will lead into that. But if Democrats say don't turn out, or the same group of people who held their nose and softened the vote against Trump during Hillary Clinton's run, where she won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College by the removal in 3 states of what were effectively progressive and liberal voters who were saying, well, I don't really like her very much, and maybe we should just try a businessman, which I also don't understand, because one thing about running a company versus running a society and a government is that you can't fire the poor. So obviously the business analogy only goes so far. That said, you've got Donald Trump running openly on this. This isn't like dog whistles anymore. This is flat out, we're going to do this. Now, he said stuff he's going to do before and failed to do it, but largely this time, his more red meat base is not going to let it go at all. And if you look at the control they allegedly have over Kevin McCarthy, this is the Republican Party. This is your Republican Party going forward. No matter how ours vote for them, they're not going to act like the John Kasichs and John McCain's and the mid-level Mitt Romney idea that seems almost quaint in its bigotry by comparison. This will be the party of Carrie Lake and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump and Lauren Boebert and Andy Biggs and Paul Gosar and Vladimir Putin. Period. End of story. That's who they're running to impress. That is who they're running to, because their ego and their self-image is based on it entirely. So the quick fixes can be quickly destroyed. Now, again, long fixes can be quickly destroyed too. That's why you have to keep at it. And again, that is where voting and our attitude, by the way, we're going to get to callers in a minute. 773-763-9278 is our number. We got a couple of calls on there. If they can hang with me through the break, I will start off with them right after this break that's coming up. But I want to be really clear on kind of, put my flag in the ground, as it were, in this particular area. Because there are, while there are rumblings, obviously, in Trump world and in DeSantis world and all that, and there is definitely either a bunch of people vying to be Trump's, red meat VP next time, or actually running to be an alternative. And the fact that Trump barely squeezes out half of his own party at this point is amazing at this point. That said, the idea that he is going to win nationally on the ticket that he's going, which is still, according to his spokesperson, that you cannot trust elections, that you cannot trust voting at all. So I don't know how you motivate. I don't know whose get out the vote campaign works like that. You need to get up. You need to motivate your friends and family to vote for me, because your vote's going to be stolen anyways, because we have to get in there so that we can stop the votes from being stolen. But you have to vote us in to do it. And if we get in, it's a legit election. If we lose, it's not. I just don't know how you motivate people, but they're certainly going to try. Trump's own spokesperson today drops the big lie when they're talking about it. They're saying, rigged and stolen, obviously spelled with 2 L's. I guess it fits better with the rigged, when you put them together, they square up better, maybe, depending on the typeface, the font. Can't really say. Anyways, point being, yes, they're going to run on that. Yes, there's a mess over there. However, this is now, in many ways, Democrats' election to lose going forward. Now, it's a year out. And so many of the issues that we're dealing with right now will not even be on the table. Trump will still be running on them. Trump still thinks he's going to run on getting out of Afghanistan, a thing he never did, but that Biden did. He wants to, if somebody cleans up a mess and makes a mess while doing it, the mess is still clean, whatever you have to say about how it was done. In the case of Trump, he was like, I'm never going to clean up the mess, and so I can get credit for just criticizing anybody who did. And it's why he had Infrastructure Week forever, but no infrastructure bill. It's why he had a healthcare plan that was always 2 weeks away. And it's why he was going to get us out of Afghanistan while keeping Bagram Air Force Base. Which is something, that I line up, if I may, right next to the bizarre explanation around adrenochrome from the QAnons. This one has been bugging me a lot lately, as people in my regular live stream know, at infotainmentwars.com. Subscribe today. Come on, we got to get our numbers up. We got to do it. And it doesn't cost you a dime. And then, of course, twitch.tv/HalSparks. You can get over there. Patreon.com/HalSparks. Also a great way to support. That said, if adrenochrome makes you high and also makes you stay young, why does everyone they accuse of being on it look like crap and is always, I guess, they don't sound high. I'm just saying. Not like Don Jr. sounds high, is just what I'm saying. Like, there's a difference. And that goes right up there with, how do you motivate your voters with an idea that voting is fixed and rigged and doesn't matter? But I guess they're, in for a penny, in for a pounding, and here they come. This will be the Trump plan. Now, after the break, I'm going to take questions, but and comments from the regular listeners of Jones' show, because it's not my show. On my Saturday show, I don't have a lot of time, so I can't take a lot of calls. So it's nice to be able to do that. So 773-763-9278. We'll get to Bob and Steve if they're still with us right after the break. But there's a phrase that I have to float before we get into this that is exemplary of the news's handling of the Biden presidency and Democratic view of economics, which is a bottom-up, middle-out idea, that the expansion of the middle class is the best way to solve most of society's problems. It lessens the economic inequality because the middle class has a lot more money, and even though billionaires will continue to grow, and there's more of them instead of there just being 6 or something. There's hundreds, which again is its own widening, and that's fine. And then ultimately the poor are helped because the middle class in America is singularly the most generous group of human beings financially on the planet. The middle class of America does more charitable giving than almost any country on the planet, not just statistically, but materially as well, on base numbers and on the percentage of their wealth that they give. And so if you expand the middle class, you help the poor. And the middle class, oftentimes, if especially as we have greater expansions of it, those folks tend to be okay with a little more charitable support for people for education and healthcare and those kind of things as well. Unlike, say, the top 0.01%. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. I'm Hal Sparks filling in for Joan Esposito, taking calls. That was groovy. That was a moment of groovy. I appreciate the groovy moment. It was groovy.
I could find better music if you want.
No, I liked it. I thought it was. I have a theory, and I don't know if you've ever tried this, but you can sing Michael McDonald gibberish to all wave jazz. So if you play any wave jazz,
I've never tried it myself, but I kind of hear
you will
that
now.
Inner Michael McDonald monologue, during a lot of songs.
Like just gibberish it, and you'll find. And then occasionally just say holding on, and it'll work. Yeah. Jones, people in the chatter, Mark says Jones' music is a little more relaxed than Hal's. That's a good way of looking at it. So. That's what I'm talking about. So, hi, everybody in the chat room. Welcome. Spread the word. Let them know I'm on early today. So, and since it's a holiday weekend, I'm going to bug out, and there won't be an afternoon show after this because quite frankly, I have to take my mom shopping. I'm buying her a gift today that we've been putting off for some while. So, but we have to do it in person, and time is of the essence. Will Yamo be there? Yes. Yamo baby, oh here. I have to say, "Shine Sweet Freedom" is one of my happy place songs. I don't have any guilty pleasure songs because I don't believe anything that gives me pleasure should make me feel guilty unless it's, I guess, unethical or against the law. So, but anything from the Running Scared soundtrack makes me happy. No more running down a long road, dancing to a different drum. Yep, I do. I keep forgetting as well. Not in love anymore. Peg is a great song too, although it has to be one of the best accidental punchlines. Yeah, CSL. Thank you. CSL and I have oddly the same music choices sometimes, and it's fantastic. I'm sure we diverge in certain areas, but it's just plenty of overlap. It's great.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Can I just point of privilege before I take calls? I want to give a big shout out to my modular folks in the chat room. Can't Stop Lying and Mark and Andrea and the other folks and Carl and others who are in there who help us keep the place nice and tidy while allowing for room for people who might have taken issue with things I say, because the nice thing is they respond to it in the same way that I do, which is water off a duck's back. I don't. It's nice knowing what you're talking about and having confidence in your own ethics, where you don't really get offended. You know what I mean? When people say things, you don't really just get. Oh, and Petrazi, thank you for the super chat. That's amazing. Happy 4th of July as well. And I'm glad you like my big hair down. This is just dried in the wind. This is just what it looks like, dried in the wind. So let's grab some calls. First up, in the order that they came in, I think Bob from Indiana. Bob, you there?
Yeah,
Ned?
I'm here.
Excellent. Hey, Bob.
Oh, man, wrong spots. Yeah, this is your Indiana troll calling.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep. Yep. I'm a New Deal troll, but if you look at me, you
Sure.
go, it's a troll, you know.
I see. Yeah, it's that under the bridge living that you like so much, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I listen to you kids over the weekend always, and I think this past weekend you were talking about Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they're taking the part of the British method from World War II, and I think it will help them greatly with these. Well, in World War II, the British had what they called the flail tank, which had chains on the front of it, and it would go ahead and dig up these mines and explode them, so the infantry could follow. And
exactly.
I think that's going to help hopefully speed up their plans with their battle plan, their campaign.
Yes, well, it has. What initially they were pushing on was a it seems like there was a two-front strategy in the lead up to what will effectively be their the full-on counteroffensive, which is according to everybody I've talked to, yet to happen. They still have brigades that haven't moved in yet. They still got materials that haven't moved in yet, because there seems to be a twofold attack plan, which is large strafe bombing and specific targeted missile strikes of ammo and fuel dumps, areas where the Russians keep stuff. And then the other thing is to clear the mined areas leading up to the trenches in the primary line that the Russians were able to build and have basically been building since they took over. So initially what it turns out, was that the Russians came in, they took the area that they took, and then they started laying mines immediately, and then started digging trenches about a mile behind those. And so there's a mile of mined areas leading up to those, it is now, the footage that I initially saw coming out of Ukraine from the sources that I look at was initially a lot of aerial shots, drones and other things striking vehicles, and then followed by footage of these mine-clearing tanks going through these areas, or indeed situations where Ukrainian trucks and other stuff had been struck by mines. And the fact that some of them had been taken out by mines to show that this is what's going on and what they're dealing with. On the other side of it, though, what's happening right now, what the footage that's coming out currently is trench clearing. So almost, I would say, every 20 minutes or so on multiple sites that I follow that are both pro-Russia and pro-Ukraine to try and get a balanced view of what's actually happening there without fog of war propaganda. You try to mix and match. And in terms of geolocated footage, stuff that's legit, the current status is trench clearing. And all you are seeing coming out of the Ukrainian side right now, for the most part, is grenades being thrown in tunnels that have been dug, and trenches being cleared, and POWs being taken by the dozens. And all for especially the last 6 days, since, even before Saturday when we were talking about that, Bob, there was a very distinct turn in that footage from aerial attack and mine clearing to these trenches, which means they've gotten to a lot of these trenches a lot faster than people thought. They thought the mined areas would be much bigger, and they are not, which is good. That means it's safer. It does not mean, though, that they haven't built fallback positions, that the Wagner guys didn't build, mine the areas in front of their trenches, which are a couple of miles behind the Russian trenches. So that's the danger. And you don't want to lose gear or human beings because you feel like you're in a hurry. Again, speed does not kill. Hurried kills. And this is a key aspect. Yeah. Sorry, did you say something, Bob? Go ahead.
Before I go back under my bridge, I'd like to say one other thing. and I would like to wish Joan and her son well and for a speedy recovery.
Yes. Much love to them, absolutely, and I'm just glad I can hold down the fort. She will be back very soon. So fingers crossed. Thanks so much, Bob. Appreciate it. You too, absolutely. I'm going to grab Steve from the Gold Coast. We should have plenty of time for him to get in here. Hey, Steve, welcome to the show. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. So I wanted to raise a couple of points. And I do think that some of the decisions are more important than others with regard to what we heard from the Supreme Court this past week. I don't think anyone was surprised, not if you're paying attention with regard to the affirmative action ruling. I mean, this has been something that conservatives have been chipping away for a long time. So for people who don't know it, these cases aren't arbitrary. The people behind this, were sure to pick the right case. So in other words, it was a way to take the grievances of the Asian American community, certain people in the Asian American community, and to put them front and center in terms of this case.
Pit a minority against a minority to clear it instead of looking like a white grievance case. Yep.
Exactly. Now putting things into a bit of context here, this really only applies to about 200 schools in America. There are about 4,000 colleges and universities. Only about 200 are such that they're either selective or highly selective in terms of, admission. So in other words, the reasonably selective schools might have 40, 50% admission, in terms of the people who apply. Somewhere like Harvard accepts about 4.5% of the people who apply. So that's highly selective. So what we're talking about is a very small number of people who this impacted to begin with. People who are qualified are still going to be able to get into Harvard, and there's apparently a bit of a cutout. So we're going to see how what this means going forward. We can't minimize, however, the importance. These are the hallways of power. These institutions are where you get the senators and the congressmen and the CEOs and the people who sit on the high court. You can go to San Diego State University. Chances are you're not going to end up on the Supreme Court. That's just a fact of life. I mean, it's possible, but you're more likely than not, you're not going to end up there. So that's important. But having said that, I think it's more of a problem with regard to where it potentially takes us, because now we've opened the door to attacking policies with regard to hiring. So, companies might in the future can bring cases. I don't need to meet some quota or some, I can go ahead and discriminate in terms of how I want with regard to the hiring of people of color, people of ethnic and racial and religious minorities, all sorts of things. And you've got to couple that with the other case, which said that basically religion, touts civil rights. And if you want to discriminate against someone who's trans or gay or whatnot, well, now apparently you can. You can use religion as an excuse. Well, now what happens when you sort of, combine these two decisions? Well, okay, so my God tells me that that such and such group is cursed according to the Bible.
Right.
And I don't want
like women for eating the apple. Right. I mean, if we're talking broad enough strokes. Yeah. If women hadn't made the apple and dag nabbit made us eat it, then we wouldn't be in this mess. Like that's effectively the most extreme case in terms of where those folks are going. I do think, and I'm curious what your take on this, Steve, because I feel like they use the sort of the bridge measure, which is if there's a bridge everyone in the community has to cross, then everyone has a right to cross it. If there is a special use bridge that is only for certain people, say a pedestrian bridge, then people in cars don't get to drive over. If you have a wheelchair or a scooter that you need versus one that you're on, or you're on a bicycle, which is powered by your feet and not electric, not a motorcycle or a motor scooter of any sort, you can use it. And that we make those, rights and privileges differences in those kind of bridges. In the case of this, the web designer idea, there is no bridge. That effectively this woman, because she's a designer, and design only happens in your own brain. You don't take up anybody else's electricity. You don't take up anybody else's space online. There is no, finite amount of bits available to cloud participate, whatever. And it's, I would argue, different than even cloud hosting or someone hosting a website is different than even the design of it. So you have the right to, for any reason you don't like someone, to not act on with your own volition. You have the right to be a bigoted idiot as long as it doesn't take resources away from someone else or interrupt the flow of their life. So since web design, that's why they picked it, I think. Web design is something that is in between no one and their destination materially. You can find someone else. You don't even have to find someone in your own town. It's not about locality. It's not, that kind of thing. They were able to sneak this one through using the no bridge analogy that I'm talking about. Whereas it doesn't work even,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and in addition to which, apparently there was no other party in this case. That they made up a name.
Yeah, it was a lie to start with, but that's why they
individual.
crafted it this way. They crafted this case to be this much of a slam dunk, and then used Trump's court to get it up there as if it had any real bearing on reality.
Yeah, and of course now, the legacy of Donald Trump, he's going to have one no matter what you think of him.
Yes.
But, his longest-lasting legacy will probably be this court. And we can elect the most progressive president, House, Senate. In the end, 5 or 6 people on the high court can strike down almost anything that we decide that we want to pass. I mean, FDR found himself in a similar situation. He threatened to pack the court. And, what we got was, a lot of New Deal legislation passed. Now, I have never been in favor of packing the court, but at the same time, there comes a breaking point when you have to say, this court does not look like this country. It does not reflect what this country wants out of legislation. It doesn't. When you look at the larger scholarly community, because these are not the only 9 people who look at the Constitution. As a matter of fact, they're not even the most qualified people in terms of academia and the scholarly community. The vast majority don't think that these interpretations hold water. And couple that with the fact that the vast majority of Americans reject this. So then what does that say? I mean, the popularity of the court and legitimacy of the court is at a record low. So there comes a point when, you've got to do something about overturning what is an existing injustice, because we didn't get here magically, all of a sudden, in the last
the issue I have,
year
I agree, but here's the issue I have with expansion of the court. Let's say we start that process, and that becomes something that has to go through the House and the Senate, where in the Senate we have effectively, 50-50, a 51-49. And then in the House, the Republicans hold it. So the idea of an expansion of the court actually getting through as a piece of legislation, the president can't do it by fiat. If he could, it would have been done a long time ago, and it would be a mistake because the worst people would have done it. So nobody wants the president to have the ability to do it with the stroke of a pen. So the process by doing it, the fastest it happens is during Biden's next term, if it happens at all. And then let's say they run.
You're right.
Yeah, that gives the Republicans the ability to run on the idea that Democrats are going to pack the court, which will be a very popular vote getter for them to stop it, which will entail, and then it goes through. Then it happens. Then they ratify it. Right about the time, again, Democrats and progressives on our side decide to flag and go, I'm not so sure about this whole democracy thing. I think these are just small issues, and until we have absolute socialism or whatever, I'm not voting again. And the Republicans come out en masse, and they put DeSantis or somebody like him in, and they get to pack that court. We're done.
Trust me, I know the argument. This whole slippery slope. If we start down this road, okay, so we'll get 11, and then they'll turn it into 15, and then somebody will turn it into 21. I understand the dangers there, and it's fraught with a lot of problems. Because I do think that a stable court is an essential part of a functional democracy. But at the same time, we've been cornered, and the only answer that we have for a lot of people who this court is going to disadvantage for generations is, 30, 40 years from now, we could have a different court. Things can change, and we'll nominate people that you'll like when these people die off. I don't know that that's a viable answer to someone.
I think the more viable answer, I got to say, I think the more viable answer is ultimately what happened with the ACA, which is the vast majority of it was held up under the constitutional argument. And even a court that wanted to get rid of it couldn't. They still couldn't, even with this stack, if it got in front of them, and it won't, even with, because there are cases brought in, to bring about the end of all kinds of things, including Social Security, and they're batting those things down, even as conservative as they are. There is a limit on what they will do. I think
you're right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we all know what happened with the ACA. What conservatives needed to do was to convince everybody in America not to vote for this, not to support it, or to repeal it early on. Because once it took hold, nobody was going to want to repeal it because they were going to like it. And that's exactly what no one is running on repealing the ACA today.
Right. And why they think they'll get away with, I say why, and we gotta take a break. I appreciate the call, and it's always good to talk to you, Steve. I think one of the reasons why they think they can get away with the affirmative action push on a lot of fronts is on a material level, you're right. It only affects 200 institutions in general, and an even smaller group of people because it's the peak of the minority of the minorities that get into schools like that to begin with. So even those affected aren't going to do it. But the voting base on the Republican side, who will never even seek to go to Harvard, who will decry elites all the time, ironically enough, will consider it a win because they're batting down, 9 minority students a year. That's they as a message, it works bigger on the right than it works in a material change on the left in terms of university college admissions. So they know it's a good sales point, whether it changes anything on a material sense, on any big scope at all. And it won't, because ultimately that number of students will be made up for, by the way, in other schools that will bridge out from it and pick up the slack, and that there will be other pathways, and not everybody has to go to the same school, I don't know, Ted Cruz went to get there. So anyways, to get into Congress, look at Boebert. If she wasn't an idiot, she could be in there for 2 decades. We got to take a break. When we come back, more of your calls. We got Robert in Florida and THKO from the chat room. Excellent. Hang in there, guys. We'll be with you right after this.
Short break. We're back in 25 seconds.
Excellent. Yeah, sorry we went long on that, but Steve's good. He's you got to carve him out a bunch of time always.
Oh, Robert dropped. He was in Venice. I was trying to express that. But he called in after Steve.
Okay, well, we'll get to THKO then after this one, if they're still there.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Welcome back. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito today, taking your calls at 773-763-9278. We have THKO from my chat room is on there, I think, right now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's me.
Howdy.
Hello?
Welcome. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can. It seemed like there was a little delay. I can hear you now. Okay, it's the infamous PHKO. Anyways, I just wanted to thank you. I don't have a real strong point to make. I just wanted to tell you how much I do appreciate you. I oscillate between no hope and a lot of hope.
I live right in the middle, don't I? Right.
Yeah. You, like I say, you talked me down off the ledge quite a bit. I still think our democracy is hanging by a thread. We're still in a real precarious situation here. The midterms were okay. We did okay. I thought we would have done a lot better. I was with you. I thought we would have kept the House and whatnot, but it still seems like some people are not motivated.
Well, that's on us. And that's the part where that's where optimism is not just something that's nice to have. It is functionally and materially the only way you ever put one foot in front of the other, ever, in any life situation. Why do you eat the next meal if you don't think you're going to live long enough to digest it? You know what I mean? Like, we all operate on optimism, but we talk ourselves out of it in this kind of cartoonish way that that everybody can complain about something in that regard. And I'm not doing this from a Pollyanna-ish thing. I'm being realistic in my optimism, because that's what you need if you do care. If you really do care, you have to look to that future that will happen. And I think this. I'm just reiterating this for the audience that doesn't hear me, because I'm normally not filling in for Joan. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to let you know. There's a lot of negative things you can say about the progressives, but at least they never get called for jury duty, do they?
Well, they get kicked out very quick. I will say they don't stay on, because it's oftentimes split between which ones will actually, which one kicks them off. Because the prosecutor might kick them off because they think nobody should go to jail ever for anything, which is really weird. And the defense might get them kicked off because they'll get rejected midway through for chit-chatting about the case because they think the defense is not doing their job, and the person will and the person who actually did it, they'll say something like, I don't think this guy did it, but I think the person who actually did it shouldn't go to jail. And then you're like, all right, well then we missed trial and we got to start from scratch. You guys are so nuts. Yeah.
Or like most of them, if you don't vote, you never get called for jury duty.
That's true. That's true. Voters, clearly.
You know.
And you can't take your ball and go home if you've never shown up to play.
Dude, I just don't get it. I still see it's like we're still begging people to vote. The third party thing is over. I'm sorry. I mean, we're literally trying to knock fascism out of the box at this point. And we
always were. That was the interesting thing was the folks that were coasting for a few years, around Hillary's election, arguably around Gore's election, these folks that thought, well, it's baked in. We got everything we need. Now it's just on autopilot. Like they're like, you know what they are? They're like Elon Musk's drivers. They think that self-driving cars are much farther along than they are, and they don't realize they've been sold a bill of goods until they're wrapped around a tree on fire caused by a battery that can't be put out with conventional fire extinguishers.
They live in a fantasy world. Honestly, like you can wave a magic wand on things and change it overnight. That's not how things work. That's not how life works. I don't know where they got this notion, how they were raised, but it's ridiculous. I mean,
I think it's all the. I think it's the Che Guevara T-shirts that are pre-printed. That is the left's equivalent of the anarchy T-shirts that are pre-printed. When you go to, I always laughed at you go into like Hot Topic, and they have anarchy T-shirts that have been pre-printed. At a certain point, if you're buying an anarchy shirt from a chain store, aren't you exactly the idiot you think runs the world? And that's the same thing, right?
I'm an old 80s punk. You know what a print was?
Yes.
A can of spray paint, a stencil. You did it was all DIY.
Yes.
You didn't buy anything from a store. They didn't carry anything back then in the late 80s, I mean,
the dumpster driving like stank punks that used to hang out wherever they were the real deal. And there's an element of that, I think, to revolutionaries as well, right? People who believed at one point when you had to have a revolution because they didn't have a say. Well, guess what? You have a say now. And your say takes time because that's how it gets after you've been through the surgery and you're back on your feet. Your road to recovery is quite frankly painful and boring. And if you just give up on it and go back to smoking and whatever you were doing that gave you the heart attack in the first place, then it's not really the system that's the problem now, is it? It's you.
I'll say that.
Right.
I just want to make one more point. I'll say this till the day I die, too. I didn't like Sanders. I liked him at first. I knew he just didn't have the power to win the nomination and whatnot. I liked his points. I don't like him personally. I think he's self-aggrandizing. I think he made a bunch of empty promises, blah, blah, blah. He developed a cult of personality. But I'll tell you what. I wasn't crazy. Let me say also, I wasn't crazy about everything about Hillary either, but I knew what was on the line. But I'll tell you what, had Sanders won that goddamn nomination, I would have been first in line to vote for him to keep Trump out of the picture.
I would have. But I will say this. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just this petulant, self-absorbed, self-important, I should say, attitude. I mean, sometimes you have to do what you have to do.
You got to be an adult. You have to.
Morning,
yeah. Adult situations require adult choices, and adult choices are not black and white. They are not cartoons. They are not coin flips. And that's why I say on my show, we got to take a break. We'll be back with more of the calls after this. I know Robert's back on the line, so we'll grab him after the commercials. If you're ever confronted with a choice in your life that seems to you to be the choice between the lesser of two evils, choose less evil. It's that easy. That's it. And then go back to your life trying to make less evil in the world. We'll be back right after this. Yeah. Thanks, PHKO. They had you written as THKO, and I was like, that doesn't sound right in the chat room. It was Chicago's PHKO, which is fine. I just read it from there. So thanks for being on. That was awesome, PHKO. Appreciate it. Thanks for being there. There. Choose less evil. It is that simple. Okay, let me try this real quick. And it's under images, is it? Then we go to here. And then where is it? It's down here. It's one of these guys. There it is. This guy. Pow. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Subscribe. Just do it. I mean, I feel like this is what I should do during the commercial breaks. I'll just put this up. While you're at it, just do it right now. Just subscribe. If you're already subscribed, tell somebody else to subscribe. Just subscribe. Magoo. Subscribe. That's all I ask. It's not all I ask, but it's mostly what I ask.
Michigan gave us Motang.
Awesome. Okay. And then let me see. Is there... Let's see. Am I... Chicago, can you tell me if you're hearing this music?
No.
Okay. All right. So I need to source that to you guys. 1 second. Somehow. Excellent. Okay. Yeah. I'm playing with fire, but you know, it's what I do. Go to sound. Go to these. Do. Get out of here. Oh, there it is. Okay.
A ninth world country, not a third world country, a ninth world country.
Okay, excellent. So music is not going there. Awesome. Okay. Now you should be able to hear it, Chicago. Hold on.
Action replays in magnified portion.
Yes.
Did you hear it? You could hear
Well,
that?
I heard
Okay.
Trump was the... You weren't playing
Yes.
music, right? Just Trump?
Nope.
Yeah.
Just Trump, yeah. That's the music.
Cool.
There, I just played a... Cool. All right. Excellent. And then there's another thing that I have to do. I gotta do it. Is the... Don't... Oh, I see. That's why. Do. Boom. And that goes to... I don't want this to go... Yeah, that works. Okay. And then just can you hear this, Chicago?
Episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up.
Okay, good. All right. So, excellent. Now that all works. Yay! If it could just stay that way. Good Lord. All right. All right. I'm taking out the sub. There you go. Boing. No, I'm not. I'm telling you to subscribe. Just do it.
We're like 1 minute away.
Okay. Perfect. Can we get another satire graphic? Oh, you mean like a different one? Or let's see. Because I think this should be that was just a text, wasn't it? Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Something along those lines. Dink. Okay. And then we have to establish a button for that. Otherwise it will drive people crazy. I'll just do it like that. Oh, that also reminds me. I gotta put my my fair use thing up too. That's my other. I need a Hal satire emoji. Oh yeah, it's a good idea. I should just get I'll just hold a sign that says satire, like that. Will just make me pop up.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Welcome back. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito today. We're in hour 2, and I want to welcome to the show Robert from Florida, who was waiting on the line, and then we lost him, and then he came back, and then we lost him again, and then he came back, and here he is. Robert, you with us? I hear what I think is phone noise. I do. We almost have him, but I don't hear him. Maybe that's Morse code. We don't know. All right, we'll try him again in a second. Chicago, check him for me. See if we can find this. If he's there, let me know when he's on the line. Now, I started to show off talking about economics because Bidenomics is something that Biden is going to run on. And here's the thing: there are people amongst us, and this is mostly on our side, but there's a bunch of them on the right as well, who are going to run on economic populism, which the root of it is that everything that's wrong economically is the cause of the government, or is the government not solving it for them fast enough, whichever one it is. You can talk about everything from like corporate welfare all the way back to, people who think that you could write a check and solve homelessness, as if homelessness itself is in single category and the homeless are a tribe of people that just behave a certain way and that they can't, won't, or will not integrate into society, and therefore trying to is a mistake. So if you can't institutionalize them, you should create institutional housing and make them move into it. And if they don't do it, just let them live on the street, even if some of them are, say, sex offenders who've been released from prison who, when they move someplace, have to register. But if they live on the sidewalk near a school, nobody is allowed to ask them a question. That's a bit weird. That's not how adults handle problems, and that's not reasonable. And it is its own form of bigotry to categorize all homeless in one fell swoop, as it is to do it with a race or a group of people based on their sexual orientation or their religious system. Homelessness is a complex problem that will not be solved with a check, and it will not ever, in its permanent form, go away. You just have to give as many off-ramps to that circumstance you possibly can within the realm of your own ethics without, and again, do you or do you not institutionalize people who are clearly not capable of taking care of themselves? And where is that line? That legislation, that conversation needs to be had amongst the electorate, and no matter who starts it and who continues it, it's going to be ugly because there will be disagreements about it. But that's how adults have to deal with those kinds of situations. Sorry, there will not be a anti-homelessness revolution. There won't be, because people are very complex organisms, and you must answer a lot of their questions and solve a lot of problems to get rid of the greater problem of homelessness. Again, a thing we can discuss even further, but I want to make sure we get to calls. Jesse in North Dakota is calling in. Let's get to Jesse. Jesse, are you there?
Hey, Al. Can you hear me?
Hey, how are you? Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Oh, finally I get to speak to the HAL 9000.
That's right. Yes, be careful what you say, because apparently I'm on the edge of opening that airlock at any second. So just tread lightly. Go ahead.
Anyway, I don't know if you covered this before. This is probably old news. But after Tucker Carlson got fired, what happened to the 40,000 plus hours of January 6th footage?
Right. So, yes, excellent point. One, he allegedly took it with him. But I have heard no mention of him actually making any use of it except to bury it, because Fox News is not going to air any more of it. And Fox there started to be these rumblings from Jan 6ers, a couple of whom, if you notice that lately there's been like an uptick in a couple of the cases against a couple of the people where somebody got more time than the prosecutors were actually asking for. Well, there's a rumor going around that part of that is in relation to the footage that he released. They showed up in that footage, and their defense, where they were trying to get their own Facebook video thrown out, or they hadn't filmed themselves but somebody else had filmed them, and their argument that wasn't even me, I was somewhere else and we were all dressed alike and blah blah blah, all that got maybe squoze down their the probability that it was them to a narrow point where the judge was like, okay, 6 months in probation. But then Tucker Carlson releases this chopped up video, by the way, with no timestamp. I would like to remind everyone that the footage that he showed of the
I noticed that.
Yeah, no timestamp. All the videos out of order to create a narrative. Classic Tucker Carlson, classic Fox. But some of the people that were in that footage, as they were trying to help this guy, got hurt by that video because it shows them as part of the group that broke down doors and attacked police officers specifically. And so one of the reasons Fox is not releasing more of that footage is because it isn't exculpatory for any of these idiots. It just means more of these Jan 6ers are going to go to jail, and some of them are filing lawsuits or threatening to file lawsuits that Fox aided the government's case against them. Obviously, it's going to come across as some sort of idiotic sovereign citizen case, but that's where they are. They're not going to air the rest of this stuff because it looks worse for Trump. It does the exact opposite of what people were hoping it would do. It doesn't show a bunch of FBI agents sheepdogging these idiots into a door. It doesn't show, it shows a lot of these straight up maggots that were at his rallies for years. That you can, that was the other thing that was coming up, was people were starting to go back over the facial footage and the pictures from the crowd of Trump's rallies leading up to Jan 6 and going, oh, there's that guy. He was at 20 Trump rallies, and this guy was at 13 Trump rallies, and this lady went to 90 of them, that kind of stuff. That's where the footage went. Nobody wants to show it, least of all Tucker Carlson, because it knifes the tires of his, courting the maggots. They'll never follow him if he's singularly responsible for 1,000 of them going to jail, which he is. He's moving in that direction. And then, obviously Fox isn't going to do it because they don't want to participate in it because they don't want to be on the hook. He's already cost them $800 million. And another 12 because Abby Goldberg, his former producer, sued for a hostile workforce, charges, whatever, against Fox News and won $12 million last week. That dude always costs them money. That's where that footage went. And nobody's going to see it because nobody wants to see it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, since it's been released to Tucker Carlson, could get access to it tomorrow and pump it out. But you'll notice she was one of the people who came out against it. On her Telegram channel, she made a statement about it where she was like, a lot of this footage is going to be used by, citizen sleuths to go after people who were just exercising their right or thought the election had been stolen. She was pushing back. She didn't want that footage put out. So, and that's pretty consistent across the entire maggot landscape, is that they're afraid it will just mean more people going to jail. And they're right. It absolutely will.
Yeah, I mean, it's over 40,000 hours, and I'm sure those prosecutors didn't have time to go over every hour of that. So it's just nothing but evidence on top of evidence, which is why these guys are getting additional sentences to what they've already gotten, because they've been seen doing just like with that shaman. Those guys kicked, the front door. Those two guys kicked the doors open. And Tucker was saying, well, how did this, they escorted the shaman in? No, two guys kicked open the doors and the shaman walked through the door with the rest of the people.
Right. Yeah. And if you break it, and again, I've gone over this so many times as we've talked about the argument from the right, which is super bizarre, especially from the stand your ground state Republicans would seem to think better of this or whatever. But the idea that, do you think that any of these guys would think that if 5 people break into your house, the only person guilty of a crime is the one who broke the window and went in first? Also, if the first one if the first one threw, like, if you found pipe bombs planted outside your house the day before and they didn't go off, but the next day 5 people broke in through a window in your house the day after pipe bombs had been laid, you're going to tell me that these folks would go, I didn't see a gun, so therefore they're unarmed. No, after a pipe bomb is laid, you're going to assume anybody carrying a backpack that enters your house is probably just going to try and, get another bite at the apple. Secondly, if the first person is armed, or you shot this person because you assumed that they very well possibly. And by the way, she had a knife in her bag. She had a hunting knife in her bag, and they were talking about hanging Nancy Pelosi. Some people were talking about shooting her. Others were talking about slitting her throat. She had a knife in her bag. So the idea that she wasn't armed is just goofy in terms of Ashley Babbitt. But let's say the other people behind her, that didn't go through. If somebody in Florida had shot somebody trying to come in through their window and 4 other people didn't come through their window, they would be touting this as a success of somebody defending their home with a gun and a good guy with a gun moment and all that stuff. They would throw their arm out, patting themselves on the back about this. But when it comes to the Capitol, where people are carrying on the business of the country, and in a very normal way, quite frankly, somehow it becomes okay. And now the only person I can think of that would think that and legitimately believe it is our foreign enemies, is countries that don't like democracy, don't like rule of law, don't like our existence, period, and would rather us fall apart, period, end of story. And so the idea that the maggots defend this is just bizarre to me. But that is why you won't see the footage, because the more you see it, the worse it looks for these people. I have a friend I was talking to who said, he was there reporting on Jan 6th. He was near some of those folks, and at one point the press, I won't say what the press pass he had said on it, but it saved his life. Basically, it kept him from beating him to death. And because they thought maybe he's just there to watch, maybe he's just, they somehow trusted him more than others, when I don't know why they would, but they just don't know any better. But the point is that he was actually trying to protect these idiots from killing themselves because they were climbing up the scaffolding and all this stuff. And he was basically telling them to be careful or use the stairs instead of killing yourself. Like, this is dumb. And they were going to kill him for it, just for saying that. And so those people who were going to beat a reporter to death for suggesting, perhaps, that they use the stairs, and who had beaten several cops to within an inch of their life, stomped one of their own to death, someone who was ironically earlier in the day carrying a "Don't Tread on Me" flag, and had aligned themselves supposedly with somebody who had carried bombs to the Capitol before, were indifferent to it or positive to it, and others, by the way, who were carrying guns. Multiple people were carrying guns in the Capitol that day. And that's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. And there was, even the Proud Boys were saying, we're just waiting for the call to bring the guns. Once we get a hold of the vice president, then we send the word out. The president will declare martial law. We'll bring the guns in. That'll be that. And they just never got to that stage because they were run by an idiot and they were surrounded by idiots. Thank God. But in this particular case, every piece of that footage will make them look worse, and they know it. That's why it'll never see the light of day in that regard. And in one day they'll release all of it. It'll be on, JFK style. It'll be on the internet in the, 20 years from now for us all to look at after the statute of limitations gone out. And there will be like 800 people minimum who should have done 5 years in jail, who will be like wiping their brow because it never came out earlier and the statute of limitations is gone. That's just the reality. Appreciate the call, by the way. I got to take a break. This is because it ain't my show. We're live on the radio. Thank you so much, Jesse. Appreciate the call. And we'll be back right after this with more calls. I think Dave from Hoffman Estates is waiting in the wings. Yeah. So 773-763-9278. It's the Joan Esposito Show. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm just filling in. Like, subscribe, infotainmentwars.com. Excellent. Hi there. No, wrong button. There you go. Yeah, I was trying to scroll through and find that Marjorie Taylor Greene bit. It was so far back in this idiocy. Yeah, I'll see if I can. And I don't know if we can. Yes, thank you, Paul. I try. Hi, Lady Diana. Satire it is true. It is appropriate. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito on WCPT while she's it's part holiday, part taking care of her kid. I think is that what's going on in Chicago? I don't know the details. They just asked me to.
Actually.
Yeah. Somebody. Yeah. So they just called and asked me to do it, so I was glad to help out.
We're back in 15 seconds.
Big Steph fan says, how do you get double pay working today on this? Yes, I get twice what I make doing my show on Saturdays, which is $0. So unless you guys Venmo me, that's how I get paid. Honestly.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Welcome back. It's Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito today. She'll be back very soon. You're in good hands. Trust me, you'll be all right. She'll be back. It's all right. It's a holiday weekend. You're going to be fine. By the way, happy 4th of July from a true Democratic patriot, a person who loves this country and believes in it, even in its original flaws, its method, and its desire to move forward and to be a forward-thinking country at a time when the world was run by monarchs and theocrats, and that is not lost here. You're never going to get a direct transition. There is no utopian turnover. People don't change that fast. They just don't. And even the effort to try and do it is worth a salute, and therefore that's the raison d'etre of this country, and it's why people came here for centuries, and why they will continue to do so, and why other countries will continually try to be more like us. Where do you think United Kingdom came from? Where do you think the European Union came from? Yeah. Everybody wants to be like Mike. That's true. So anyways, remember, it's our flag. Don't let anybody take it away and make it, a symbol of hatred or bigotry on their behalf. They don't get to usurp it. That's not how this works. Right-wingers and racists don't get the OK symbol. They don't get to take, Indian and Tibetan symbols and convert them. That's not the age we live in anymore. You don't get to culturally appropriate things just because you think nobody else is using it. No. End of story. That's my flag. And I would like to say, for the record, before we get to our next caller, I'd like to say the flag itself, burning it and the ability to burn it, I wouldn't recommend burning it. I would never burn one myself. But the ability to burn it is one of the things that makes it so valuable, because it represents that freedom. If you outlaw the burning of the flag, you diminish its value. You say, our flag is not strong enough to handle that kind of protest. And that's absurd. It's childish. It's weak. And I will continue to fight for the ability for people to, desecrate and set it on fire if they want to, because all I think is that it makes it stronger as a representative symbol of freedom, even if that freedom is uncomfortable in that regard. Not wrapping somebody and setting on fire. So I don't care. You're burning a piece of fabric. And that's what makes, to me, that's what makes the American flag the Obi-Wan Kenobi of flags. You can strike me down, Darth, but I'll only become more powerful. That's how it works. There you go. So, all right. Now, Dave from Hoffman Estates is on the phone.
Hey, Hal.
Dave, you there?
Yeah,
go
Lady
ahead.
Liberty right now. She got a few bumps and bruises and that, but she's going to persevere. And
yep, she's going to be all right.
As for
she's tougher than we are.
Destroying the flag, yep. As for destroying the flag, you can only if it's unserviceable, like rips, tears,
right?
And,
Yes, you're supposed to burn it if it falls, and if it's you can burn it if it's been if it's been destroyed, if it's physically worn out. That's the way you properly get rid of it. But you can also do it in protest. I just wouldn't, because I think that's antithetical to the message that I'm trying to go. I'm pro-democracy, pro everyone having their say in our society, and that's what this country was built on, and what it moved towards, and what it continues to move towards. And so saying we should just scratch it and start over with this idea that somehow, if we did start over, we wouldn't go right back to authoritarianism and monarchy and theocracy, which is exactly what the Trumpies are trying to do. If you can effectively look at them as neo-monarchists, That's what they want, a god king or a figurehead. And they yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, speaking on flags, I keep thinking that when they got these people flying these Trump flags, I could consider that equal to a swastika flag.
Well, it's in some ways, I will say that's their intent, and there are certainly people who own both. There's no question. So there seems to be, if you in this country, if you own a swastika flag, you have a Third Reich or a red, white, and black flag, and it's in good shape because it either sees a lot of use or doesn't. You're going to have a Trump flag too. That's just the nature of it. Now, do I think everybody who has a Trump flag has one of those things? No, I do not. Do I think they're a little closer to where the Germans were in the 5 years leading up to where Hitler took power? Yes. And so you could there's an argument you could have talked those people down, and then after Hitler took over, there are some of those people that were willing to be talked down, and those people were murdered. And so there's an important distinction, and I think that's where Hillary's basket of deplorables idea had legs, and that's where Biden's distinction between MAGA Republicans and regular run-of-the-mill Republicans is. A lot of people just wave those flags because they have an R on their jersey and they're afraid of communism or some crap, and that's just they're stuck there. And I do think they're reachable. Yeah, go ahead.
Before I get to what I was going to call originally, was to tie off of what your previous caller, like when they talking on them J6 films and that, and shouldn't them been part of the National Archives?
Right. Well, it's not under the Presidential Records Act, although it should be. You could argue that I'm surprised Trump didn't lay claim to all that footage as the best example of his presidency that exists on film. But there are different rules about it because they expunge some of that stuff because of privacy concerns about citizens who come and go, and there's rules about it. Now, it's evidence of a crime, so the FBI can keep it until the statute of limitations runs out, or or until they prosecute the final case based on the statute of limitations. That's how long it can be stored now. On the regular, though, that stuff is rolled over. They face scan people who come in, and then they roll over the actual footage unless it was, it's flagged by Secret Service or Capitol Police. Unless it's flagged, they roll it over all the time.
Yeah. And then with that Ashley Babb at that time, when she was in the Air Force, her job was security. She should have known better. She knew that. You go crossing that line.
Well, you can argue that she did. Although I think she was spun at that point. I think she had, I do not write off people's mental health as an excuse for certain kinds of behavior. If you're able to cross the street without getting killed on your way to killing somebody, you're sane enough to stand trial because you have enough self-preservation instinct and you have a idea of what you're doing that supersedes any kind of, biological or hormonal impulse that might have taken over and turned you into an animal, quote unquote. So the same thing applies to her in this regard. But you can tell from her videos that she has got kind of that, almost the QAnon folks that got wrapped up during COVID and thought the end was nigh. She had it reminds me of some of the people they interviewed at Waco, or the people they interviewed that were a part of the Heaven's Gate cult who managed to talk themselves out of that right before it happened. It's that same kind of borderline personality issue. I wouldn't call it a disorder because God knows what their order was like the rest of the time. But yeah, I think she knew what the rules were. She knew what it was, but she thought they didn't apply to her.
Hey, and I'll close you with this one, Hal. On what I originally was going to do was, I read last week about these Trump supporters. A lot of them, I was reading, where they're getting tired of defending this guy because every time or every other day they got to turn around and they're having to defend him on something new,
Mm-hmm.
And
it's hard to keep track.
And because he's getting charged back to back to back, and then some of this stuff is 180 from the last thing, and so
he lies. His lies kind of roll back on themselves, right?
Yeah, and some of them are suspecting too that there's a lot of them that are quiet quitting him. They're telling these pollsters and stuff that, oh yeah, I'm voting for this guy, but he, that they even think that he doesn't even sound as strong as he did back in 16 and 2020 that
they know for a fact he doesn't. Well, they said this weekend, and we got to take a break. I appreciate the call, but Dave, they said, thank you. You too. They said specifically that Trump said 75,000 people were at his rally. That the Secret Service is saying there were closer to 3,000 inside, and they estimated 10,000 outside, but largely because they didn't care. They were eyeballing it and moved on. 3,000. By the way, 75,000 versus 3,000. That's Trump numbers. Trump thinks 3,000 is 75,000. Is that the man you want in charge in the next debt ceiling increase or decrease? Right, exactly. You should know the honesty about numbers should be something that you can agree that it should be a base expectation for a candidate. We'll take a break. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito. We have more calls on the other side. We got Dale and Dan waiting on the line. We'll talk to them after this break. Excellent. Okay, I'm scrolling through the high chat room. You can't read or count.
I don't read, obviously.
But he's he's a math whiz. That's how that's what you learn.
When interest rates and taxes spiral upward in an uncontrolled way, the numbers should skyrocket downward.
Oh God. Lindsey Graham got booed. Yes. The booing of Lindsey Graham was pretty hysterical. And I think Morning Joe was saying that like Trump was making him go out there knowing he would be booed. It just as punishment. Like, who does this? Why don't you just let him put you in a vinyl zipper suit and tie you up with Japanese sex knots at a certain point? Just get it over with.
We're back in 15 seconds.
Yep. Thank you. And okay, cool.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We've got a couple other calls on the line, but real quick, one of the things that we keep dealing with too is I don't know if I have to remind anybody, but when Biden came in, one of the things that Trump was running on was that he's going to crash the economy, the stock market's going to crash, you're going to have 25% unemployment. Which interestingly enough is the youth unemployment number in China right now, but we'll get to that in a minute. And oil's going to be $200 a barrel, right? He was running on that in 2020. As soon as Biden gets elected, the minute they say he's president, much less gets in there and starts enacting policy, that's going to crash the economy. The stock market is going to eat crap. It's gone. It's ruined forever because of the policies that they're going to put in. Never mind if he gets in there and Biden's able to work at it for a couple of years. We're done. Okay. So just for the record, oil is $70 a barrel right now. And it's dropping. It has been below $70, like $68, $69 a barrel, even with cuts by the Saudis over the last 7 months. The NASDAQ is at 13,817. It's up. The S&P is up, and it's up in its longest run in, I think, a decade at this point. And there's a fascinating, I mean, I don't even know how to like phrase what this is called in terms of the, I guess it's how they are responding, how the Republicans and the sort of right-leaning economics guys are, especially the ones at Bloomberg and other like I guess CNBC and Market Watch and those guys, when they talk about the economy, this is a question that comes up, and I'll show this on the chat on infotainmentwars.com just so people can look at this so they know I'm not making this up. This is from Bloomberg under their newsletter. Surveillance. Can stocks keep rallying during a, quote, growth recession? As the second half gets underway, can equities keep climbing when growth is below potential? Now, is growth going down? No. obviously, or it wouldn't be growth, would it? No, it's growing, but it's growing below potential. Okay, who determines what that potential is in reality? No one, because it's always a guess. You can make educated guesses. You can base your guess on the reality of the, material wealth out there that's meant to be made and what you think the price of cobalt should or would be, or blah, blah, blah. Or, you can game on treasuries and other stuff as if the pandemic never occurred, but you don't have a baseline. Nobody has a baseline for what the economy does when it's this broad in terms of, people investing in the economy and themselves, in their own businesses and starting their own businesses and technological businesses we're talking pre-cell phone, pre-everything, pre the stock market. When you talk about the last big pandemic that you could track how it had an effect on the economy. And it took a decade to work its way through if you think it had any impact on the stock market crash of the 30s. And it's hugely debatable that there was any part of it. I wouldn't agree with it, but some people might try to throw that around. But in the meantime, what these folks want to do is pretend we didn't just go through COVID, and that they can look at the rules and the sort of constants and the elements of the equation that they normally add up and pretend that giant X isn't in the equation, what the impact of COVID would be and could be going forward. So they keep operating on this potential idea. Well, potential should be based on the reality that you are in, which is a shortening of supply chains by North America, specifically between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, tightening that up. Look at the Mexican. You want to go down a rabbit hole? Go look at Mexican manufacturing, the rise in Mexican manufacturing, and know that people are calling Mexico the new China. And you know what's nice about that? We're a lot closer. And it's really hard for Republicans to argue against, Mexican workers and when they get to stay home and have a better job. And also when other countries are going there to get better jobs. Trust me, that's where we're headed. So it's an increasing problem for Republicans. But I love the phrase growth recession. They are like the fact that they are having to concoct something like this to push back on Bidenomics and how well that it does, under Democrats is amazing to me. Now let's get to our callers. First up, we have Dale from Kansas. Right on, Dale from Kansas. How are you?
Hey, Hal, how are you?
I'm good. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm in? Okay. Hey, first off, I'd like to thank you for your stoic optimism during this crazy time. It's a big deal. I guess I need some advice. I think this is a really important issue, and you talk about it on your show, and it's covered, but we all have family members that think differently and have different concepts and ideas. But I noticed a change after January 6th because I have a lot of MAGA family members.
Right.
And the ability to communicate and have some balanced conversation is almost impossible. And they have talked about culturally appropriating patriotism. I mean, they support someone that had classified documents in an unsanctioned, unsecured location, and
in a rental property, in a place where he rents it out to foreigners, to foreign agents who are having fake weddings. I think ultimately, I know exactly where you're going because I've had to deal with this. I have some relatives myself. As a matter of fact, I famously had a discussion that I think members of my immediate family were concerned about happening at one point because we got, family together. And it's one thing to be the outspoken person in your family. It's another thing to be me, because there's plenty of video of me saying exactly what I say, and there's no walking it back, nor would I. But they know what's coming. Like, they're expecting a fight, and they also expect that I know my business. Or that I'm deluded beyond measure. If they've never seen the show, they think that I'm, I've drank the Kool-Aid and that's that and whatever. Okay, so I've had these conversations, and there are a couple of keys where you can deal with it very easily. One is avoid all jargon as best you can, and it's a good lesson for us in general to be able to describe what we're what we're saying to someone else without just using the codes and jargon that we're used to when shorthand when we deal with people who are already on the page with us, because they'll do that a lot. You'll notice
that
a lot.
will trigger them.
Yes.
Yeah, and using jargon will trigger them that, oh, you're just because you're listening from this news source. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Yes. So just be aware of the jargon that you're using. The second is where you can adapt their jargon against their conversation, because a lot of times, you know, like freedom. They love the word freedom. I don't think they know what it means, but the idea is that I think that a woman should have the freedom to choose. And I think when given that, most of them will choose to carry the baby to term. And I think a woman should have the freedom in the United States to be able to take her rights with her no matter where she goes. That state to state, she shouldn't have to have her freedoms curtailed by whatever state changes. And leave it at that. Again, part of this is leaving the argument on the table where it is, having a faith in your argument that makes you recognize you don't have to chase it, because they will recognize that as confidence in your belief system. And that will appeal to them more than your argument at all. There was a story that just came out, and I posted it this morning. I don't know if you saw it on my Twitter, but it was about how allegedly people prefer a leader or a boss who shows, like, I think the wording was like minor narcissism, minor levels of narcissism. And I was like, you mean confidence? Like all the traits that they were establishing with in narcissism, like minor narcissism is confidence. It is previous belief in what you've done leading to a future belief in what you will do and a confidence to continue moving forward. And people feel they trust that more than someone who is second guessing all the time. And I'm like, why is that about narcissism at all? It's a little silly. Well, the same thing applies to these folks. And this why you have to look at who, you know, they always say, you know, speak to your audience, not to yourself. And it's really important to craft your message for the person you're talking to. And if somebody is supporting Donald Trump, they are scared to death. Again, I believe he's their pit bull. They don't care. They know it's possible he will shake the baby. They know it's possible he will bite grandma and she'll lose another leg. But they're more concerned about keeping certain people out of the yard. They are so afraid of the people outside the yard that they love their pit bull. Okay? And if you discuss it in those terms and you go, you know, it's interesting. I just think you might need a dog that barks, but I don't think you need one that will shake the baby. That is a conversation that, you know, what a German Shepherd isn't good enough for you guys? You think he's not him, you know, he can do the job and he's got less of a chance of actually biting you. You know that, right? So that, not against pit bulls, by the way. I'm using this analogy. They're lovely animals. The point I'm trying to make is...
Yeah, I got you.
So in dialing back...
I'm old. I remember German Shepherds, and then it doesn't matter.
And then Doberman Pinschers, and then pit bulls. They were all the demon dogs they've always had. Right, sure. And that was related to World War II.
We're close to the same age, so yes.
Yes, right. So here's what you have to do. It's like when you're talking to those people, listen really strongly for for any of the jargon points where you've got an edge in. And you know for a fact, for example, that Trump partied with Epstein for a couple of decades. And allegedly they'll say, yeah, but he kicked him out because he hit on a teenage girl at Mar-a-Lago. And and the answer to that is, yes, I know. He only cared about a 16-year-old girl that was the daughter of one of the members. He didn't care about the other 16-year-old girls that were in a, 12-mile radius of the place that were constantly being taken to Epstein's. He didn't have a problem with that, right? He didn't. He only got mad when it was stepped on the gravy train. And again, if you want to go, and that's why I always have that fallback. If you want to go after everybody who hung out with Epstein, especially anybody who was after he was convicted, because again, people have plausible deniability up till the person is no longer innocent, right? After that, the hell with you. You can go, it's fine. If that means Bill Clinton and Bill Gates and what go down with Trump too, cool. Look at us. We're all on the same page. Isn't that nice? So you know what I mean? So you can give that you can give that argument without giving up your ethical ground on something and make them recognize you have a stronger ethical position than they do in that situation, for example. And again, these will all be case to case, and I can't solve all of them, but that's the kind of thing you can do is like, look, I'm just not Trump doesn't actually, like even Mar-a-Lago, it's not his home. It's a rental property. He lives there part of the year. He winters there. So the idea that it's his home, if that's his home, what's Bedminster? What's Trump Tower? Does he have a bunch of homes? Does he rent out all of his homes? If all of his homes are for rent, isn't he just an Airbnb host that's barely home? And in that case, are you cool with classified documents being at an Airbnb? That's simple. And then if they go, but Mahunter,
No.
never mind. I didn't ask you about him yet. Solve this, and then we'll talk about that, because I have answers for that too. And then leave it at that.
Hal, that's a point. That's a point right there that you just said with the Hunter. The grease pig of the conversation will be whataboutism. And a colleague of mine talked about that knows a lot about Russian politics and just Russia in general. That is like an old Soviet psyop of whataboutism. That's an old embedded thing, and it's just it's when you see it happen, it's just how to
I agree. Here's my primary answer.
Manage the whataboutism.
Here's what I would say to anybody at the very beginning of the whataboutism. What you have to plant something in their lap that makes them address the whataboutism, but not get into it with them. You can't get stuck to it. And the easiest one is that I see. So you're just arguing nothing matters. And they'll go, no, what about, they'll go, I'm just saying that it doesn't matter. If the law doesn't matter for one guy, it doesn't matter for the other guy. And I'm not arguing that it shouldn't matter for one guy. I'm arguing that it should. So you're making the case that it shouldn't matter because that guy got away with it. Should Trump get away with it? If you're not, then you're saying nothing matters. You're just saying you're mad because one person's getting away with it and another person isn't. But you're not mad about the thing itself. I'm mad about the thing itself. So let's prove the thing itself and get rid of that. And that brings them back to the table a little bit and just go, throw that. You're just arguing that nothing matters, that it's just nihilism. You don't care. And they'll get mad because they think they do care when they actually don't. They're just arguing their side. And you've got the strength position of arguing against leaving classified documents at a rental property when you're not there half the year. And you've been found, you're on tape, your own voice admitted. This is not even like Hunter Biden's not even admitting those emails are his, nor should he. But the voice on that recording, Trump knows and says is his voice, and he is engaged in having classified documents that he knows he didn't have the ability to classify, and he engaged in a conspiracy with Walt Nauta, they both admit to, of moving those boxes around in between when his lawyer said they were going to pick them up and when they actually did. And that's it. And that should either matter or it doesn't.
Absolutely dragging other people into it. Yeah. Yeah. Because, even if you have classification, doesn't mean that you need to know everything. And he wasn't president anymore. And then everybody else in that room that saw that, they're tagged too. They're in trouble too.
They'll go down that way.
That's excellent.
Again, and the other one is you and I went further into the conversation than I would go with them. I would simply say you're just arguing that nothing matters. You're just trying to zero this out so nobody gets punished. Yeah. Is that the idea? And they'll argue that Hunter Biden should, but in that you're still not arguing what Trump did. You're just avoiding talking to me about what he did. And bring them back to that. Bring them back to their own ethical misgivings about this. Not about personalities, not about their support for him, not about MAGA, not about making America great again, not about how you can make not freedom, patriotism. But why this guy? Why this rich New York tax cheat, who was a legacy guy at a school who they would normally call an elite, somehow he's their hero. And why are you defending this guy above all else, above your own interests, above the United States? And then, if you want to go into the Hunter Biden thing, you can just send them to my videos and I'll clean up the mess. But the reality is...
I've got that. We're good. But
yes.
Thanks to you.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. I got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the Joan Esposito Show. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in. We'll be back with more of your calls after this. 773-763-9278.
What they don't know is that when we hang it up in 5 years or 9 years or 13 years, or maybe 17 years.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. He was going to stay president for however long, like he was going to go blow past the. That's Trump. Lynn Wood posted that video for 4th of July. Mm-hmm. And Chicago, we good?
Yes, we are back in 10 seconds.
Excellent. Thank you.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Welcome back to the show. So, more callers. We have David from North Miami Beach in, not too far from the Trump Tower Anchor Baby program that was run out of Trump Tower, Miami, for Russian citizenship for many, many years. It was a well-oiled machine. Ew! I just grossed myself out. David, are you there?
Ew. Is that the resort to the Sunny Isles Beach area? I know there's a couple around here, but it's hard to keep track.
Yes. Well, they call it like Little Moscow or whatever, but that's Trump Tower is situated, the Trump building or whatever it is.
If it's Sunny Isles Beach, that's about right, correct. Yeah, a lot of Russian and Ukrainian speakers.
Yeah, and so the Russians were there to have babies in the Trump building, and it was like a prenatal ward instead of an apartment building. But anyways, welcome to the show.
For poor Mexicans, it was for rich Russians. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Well, the poor Mexicans run it and do all the work, and the rich Russians have the babies and get to stay and get citizenship. The irony.
And there's towers going up right here where I might be mayor next year. We'll see.
All right.
I'm actually running for commissioner, but I might wind up running for mayor.
Okay.
So the good news is we found the femme, and it's Joan Esposito. The bad news is I did not win the Powerball money to hire you to help me to remake the movie Time Changer, Kitty.
Okay.
But I just wanted to, in the spirit of the movie Tropic Thunder, as a Nader voter, I'm warning all you kids: don't go full Nader. Don't do it. I've been there.
Understood.
Okay?
I hear you. Yes.
Steffi voted for Reagan, and Tom campaigned for the crazy guy of 64, right? Okay, we all make useful mistakes, so let's try to skip it. Let's try to break the pattern of we get 8 years of boredom, and so let's just not go there again. And for those of us who missed Jim Ward, the movie 1776 will be broadcast a lot, where William Daniels is a terrible imitation of Jim Ward. So I recommend
this is true.
You do that as a double feature with Recount.
That's right.
Because Recount, for all of its problems, shows us what went down here, even though that's Jacksonville posing as Miami.
Right. I have I have an ongoing thing, obviously, a major chip on my shoulder for the folks that believe that you can kind of phone it in, or you can, your vote doesn't really matter. There's sort of like enforced nihilism that you're talking about that is ultimately like the Nader vote. And arguably RFK and Marianne Williamson are like, two dogs wrestling over a bone in the corner. And that's what it will amount to. But anyone who seriously takes, their push as if it will have value for the Democratic Party or the goals of the Democratic Party, ultimately, it should themselves be embarrassed by that thought crossing their transom and not participated in any further. I have never worked with RFK, but I have worked with Marianne Williamson for a very long time at one point. I know her very well, and from what I could tell from RFK, they're cut from the same egotism cloth. So.
Okay, but there's a bigger problem as we saw in 2000, that otherwise smart people make mistakes. Whether it was the butterfly ballot in Boca Raton, or having an actual Congress person like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, try to run the party while still being a full-time congressperson? No, that's these other things are going to happen. And at least last time, you could argue it wasn't that Biden won; it's that Trump lost to the Lincoln Project, which, while still around, is not as strong as it was. So you've got to. This is a chess. It's Chinese checkers with at least 6 sides going on.
Well, I would argue the independents. There is one of the most reassuring things that I've seen in terms of polling going on is how independents feel about Donald Trump or even DeSantis. That between the two of them, they hate them both equally. And those are the two front runners the Republicans are going to run next time. And it may ultimately be that this belief system that the youth vote is always courted to kind of pick up the slack in the Democratic side. But because of the Dobbs decision, that is expected to retain its resilience and strength. But what will put us over the top, as did, by the way, in the last election, which you would argue is probably what you're talking about in that Lincoln Project zone of people, is the independents that don't they're not going to go with no labels because they actually want to vote for someone that will actually win the office, not just a, protest vote, unlike, right and left wingers deep inside each party. That group is A, large, and B, leaning 70% towards Biden right now, which is enormous and a bigger shift in his direction than last time.
You're talking Morning Joe, yeah.
That's right. That is a lot of conservatives. That is and real conservatives. Again, and I've always said you can have a full conversation from legit conservative to legit liberal within the Democratic Party. Anybody who has a sensible thought in their head but just has a difference of opinion on the solution, not necessarily the problem, I would argue that's the conservative to liberal argument that happens. And that happens whether you like it or not.
Up on your Greg Palast if you're feeling confident, because be paranoid. Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, always operate like you're behind, no question. But a lot of times there are a bunch of people who think they're way more important to this, and think I'm going to hold my nose and stomp my feet and be really loud about what I'm going to do, and that'll force the Biden administration to put themselves into a corner where they might lose the general election. The reality is that's not the case. And as a matter of fact, it is bringing the Biden administration's approach to a lot of these things, which sometimes pisses off the farthest part of the left in the party, brings in more independents than it loses in those numbers. And that's how you expand a party to reach a greater group of people, and you ultimately do unite the country. And I think Biden's goal is that, clearly.
I like to think Biden is wearing a bracelet. What would Bo do? Because he thought Bo would be president about now, give or take 4 years.
Well, and he wants to live up to what his son would have done. Yeah.
Right. He has an angel on the shoulder next to Bernie, next to Elizabeth Warren, an opposite to the devils on his other shoulder of Kirsten Sinema, and of course
and Joe Manchin, right?
The West Virginia guy. Yeah.
Joe Manchin, yeah.
And now you know the rest of the story.
Yes, exactly. And I would like to say that if that's your breadth of human from devil to angel, you're doing okay. Because in reality, in the angels to devils zone of things, the devil side is a lot more virulent, disgusting, and bigoted, and farther down the road than Manchin or Sinema will ever go, as annoying as they could possibly be. It's not even close. And like I said, that's that conversation. That's that whole conversation that's on the Democratic side of the aisle. In the Republican side right now, it's essentially an argument for who can out-Trump each other while becoming less popular in their own district, which is kind of amazing. It is antithetical to what I think a lot of people thought. We got to take a break, and we'll be back right after this. Yeah, it is a bit. The inmates are definitely running it. When we come back, more calls. Thanks so much for that, David. I appreciate it. We'll be back. It's the Joan Esposito Show. I'm Hal Sparks filling in. Dan from the North Side will be back. Will be with us on the other side of the commercial break. Hey guys, in the chat, you want to see something? And this is one of the Moscow sites that I follow. That is those are 2 anti-tank mines. They don't have fuses in them, but they were found in a package at the Moscow Central Postal Customs. They wanted to send the parcel to America. And according to the documents, these were retro streetlights that they were going to go through as streetlights, when indeed they are anti-tank mines. I can see how you could think they were the housing for a retro streetlight. Imagine hanging that in your house and finding unexploded munitions in this plate just below where the fuse would be. Good times. They were going to just mail them to the States. Fun. Hold on 1 second. Okay. There we go. Bringing some stuff up. We're in the commercial break. So, subscribe, everybody. Subscribe. Don't be afraid. Just subscribe. Helps Rick Bear. All right. There is trying to bring something up and show you guys, but I don't want, check this out. See, I'll pan down. There's a drone in the air, and there it goes. That's a drone getting shot out of the air in Ukraine by guys with machine guns in their backyard. There they are. Yep. This drone was flying around, and they just shot it down because they're the Shahed drones from Iran, and they make a lot of noise. They sound like a moped, so you know they're coming. I can't show you that. I saw a piece of video earlier today. I was telling you there's some clearing video where they're going into the trenches, and they're going into, they're throwing grenades in these places, and they're now moving in where they're clearing, person to person. This is that's a ammo truck or a fuel truck being blown up, I believe. I think it might be a tank, though. You can't see from where they are. It just as a Russian tin can, epically opened. But you can see how close they are. This is there's a lot of body cam footage happening right now, and this body cam footage, all of it is 48 hours old because they don't release it because you can geolocate to where they are by the weather and by cloud shapes and blah blah, like all this stuff, tree lines, any other sensors that they had put behind, all that kind of stuff. But there was footage like this from a similar gathering where they showed they got three, they saved 3 Russians who surrendered, but one guy didn't, and another guy was leading them to an injured guy. They were going like, one of our guys is injured, he'll surrender too, I'll take you to him. And in the video, the guy walks the Ukrainian soldier who's going to give this guy medical attention to him. And I'm sorry I can't show you this because you don't want to see it more than likely. The Ukrainian soldier is like, what's your deal, where you hit, all that kind of stuff. He even sees that the guy has a wound in his side, and he's like, and he goes, you're fine, we'll check you. And then he looks over and he sees a pin from a grenade around the guy's finger. And basically the other guy led him into a death trap. The idea was, this guy's wounded, he's going to suicide himself. And so the Russian soldier led the Ukrainian medic over to him so that he could blow up himself and the medic. So the guy could blow up himself and the medic. And luckily the medic saw his hand come out, saw the pin, shot at him, by the way, as he was running away, but then the grenade blew up. Rough stuff. Just rough. But the whole scene plays out on video, on body cam, and the most tense-filled part of it is the fact that this unit of guys, these Ukrainian soldiers, like 6 of them, they have one medic with them, and they sent the medic to this wounded Russian soldier, and the guy tried to take him out so that he'd get so essentially so that if Ukrainians got wounded, they would die of their wounds because they don't have a guy to, yeah. And then the guy who
back in 20,
thank you, the guy who ran back, they still took that guy in as a POW, even though he led effectively this guy into an ambush. Just incredible stories, and you could just see it play out. It's crazy.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito this hour. Taking your calls, 773-763-9278. Dan on the north side, I think, is still with us. Let me see. Dan, you there? Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, I am, sir. I had a few comments. You can decide which one you want to make a comment about. It ain't no big deal.
Sure.
I was just talking about the homeless is one thing. I was a volunteer for many years with homeless, and many of those people are very good people, just down in their luck. They're pretty straight ahead, but there's money that could be made from them through taxes. And I think the government should take that into advantage or take that into a position and try to help them. The other thing I wanted to make a comment on has to do with I'm partially self-employed. I pay 15%. I wouldn't mind if they went up to 17% or 20% on my taxes because, hey, it's a possibility it could balance part of the budget from that. And there's a lot of people that could pay even more money. I mean, pay that percentage, but pay a lot more money than I could.
Right.
On that thing. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention was you guys got a great show, and I appreciate it, and I try to tune in as much as I can, make any kind of comments. Oh, yeah, I just wanted to ask, are you guys going to go on TV one day?
Well, I've had my fair share. Joan very well may. I live stream my stuff on the internet, which is just as good, it seems, these days, because I have a lot more flexibility in what I'm allowed to talk about. And on my live stream, I can even use big grown-up words, which I can't do on the radio. That said, where did you do the work that you did with the homeless that you were talking about? Was it like volunteering at a shelter or?
Yeah, shelter. Actually, I was working for Oak Park Arts Council. She used to pay me to come in and play, which was really cool. So I played one or two times a month, make $75. And I met a lot of the homeless, and I've been back, and I've taken some homeless over there. I can tell you, most of them are really straight people, need a meal, need a place to stay overnight, and so forth. Need some kind of shelter, like some kind of it could be like a city shelter or something like this, or an old building or whatever. And they'll get straightened out, and then they need some intermediate people to come in there, possibly psychiatrist people or job.
Sure. Yep. Well, that is exactly how you handle that element of the homeless problem in general, and it varies in size depending on the market of where you are. In Chicago, and the surrounding area, there is a tendency more for people who have fallen through the cracks and who are trying to stabilize. The Midwest, by the way, homeless are they do, they're less like drug homeless in that particular, whereas on the West Coast, anywhere the weather's good, you'll find people who've hoboed out to an area where they can feel like they could just kind of live out in the open. They don't necessarily need a place to live. It's safer out. But when you're in the cold and that kind of stuff, survival is a real issue. And so the people that you're talking about are a select version of the homeless problem that can absolutely be helped with more funding, jobs programs, and education and psychological help. These are the people who are effectively, yes, the low-hanging fruit of the problem, and the first element that every society, I think, is comfortable addressing most of the time, but also you have to, it will be a constant gardening. It is not something that just goes away. You help someone, another person will go through the same kind of thing. And so having a system in place that people are aware of, that they, that will help them get back on their feet, so that if they feel like they're on the edge of it, and this is where welfare and other programs, like a unified look at those programs and making people aware of them, and that, you know, a sort of pride in helping them in terms of your tax dollars, I think a push to remind people of that is valid and necessary. There is another group of homeless that I think we can agree are mentally ill beyond repair, almost, where they are for hospitalization. So yes, and those folks we need to find a solution for as well. Letting them die on the streets because right-wingers think that, you know, putting people in an asylum is just an excuse to eventually scoop up all the MAGA people or something, which is why they push back on this thing. It's why Reagan ultimately ended the federal funding for asylums, was this idea that they thought commies were going to take over and put all, you know, freedom-loving conservatives in mental institutions. So they cut the funding on them and dump these folks out on the street. That is not a humane thing to do for a group of people, and nor is expecting them to be able to take medication on the regular that they've been given, you know, to maintain and you know, show up for a psychiatrist, or even to the point where they can understand physically where they are at any given time. Not institutionalizing those people, I think, is a hole in our society that we need to figure out. We have to push for that. Right. And it's more on a city to city level. So if you're, you know, we had somebody who was talking earlier about running for mayor, David, who's in Miami Beach. And in that area, you know, they have a similar thing that we have on the West Coast as far as their homeless issue. You have to be able to assess people and go, this person cannot take care of themselves. And whether they like it or not, we just can't let them, you know, basically degrade in public until they step in front of a bus or take out, you know, a vengeful nightmare on one of their fellow citizens. And then there are those who simply choose it, who want to nomad it through life, who view themselves as dumpster diving skanky punks, or drug tourists like you have in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Any place that has legalized drugs on the broad they've got an influx of what are called, you know, what are effectively cyber nomads, people who've got phones and they use Wi-Fi, they have laptops, they have tents or vans that they live in, but they are effectively just living on the street because they are, you know, they can use drugs and that type of stuff. That is a different solution than the people we were talking about that you spoke of earlier, who are on a cleaner track into regular society. That's a little murkier because it's a case-by-case basis. Some are criminal and some are just jerks and some are well-meaning hippie types, and you've got to be able to tell the difference. So those solutions require adults in the room, not the Donald Trumps of the world who are just looking for the flush lever on society every time they look at somebody they don't like. Yep.
Yeah, there's that element, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, you know, I think Alan Watts.
I appreciate talking to you.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling in.
Great show, man. I listen up, but I always call you guys. And I talk to them around the town, Chicago, with Alan and so forth.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll get that up to 20% and balance the budget. You know.
That's the thing. The other thing you could do is, and this is what the Biden administration has been doing, is broaden the middle class, so you don't have to raise the taxes, but the tax base increases. The number of taxpayers increases with the middle class, unlike when poor people who are below the tax basis or rich people who hide it. And so by expanding the middle class, you can pay off the debt if you make the middle class of the United States the largest group of humans. And that strategically is the best way to pay off the debt, because you don't have to raise anybody's personal taxes, but you raise the tax base overall, and you improve people's lives in the process. So I think that's the best approach, and that's the approach the Biden administration is taking. It's a little slow and steady wins the race for people who want a revolution, but but I guess that's the job of people like me to remind people. So yeah, appreciate the call.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my friend.
Sure, absolutely. Take care. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito. Now, you know, there's so much back and forth right now on the right between, you know, their own, I guess, the candidates that are running, and how much, you know, any of them has a shot is I mean, I guess it's up for debate across the board. But I will say this for the record. Donald Trump is not going to be president again. Let's just state that outright. Now, whether he has to lose this next election for that to become a reality within the Republican Party, or they realize over the next year, as he is continually indicted and he continues to fight this country's root reason for being in terms of democracy, is another. But he's not going to be president again. He is not. And so those who support and want him to be the kingmaker of the Republican Party or whatever, knock yourself out, but you're going to have to find a replacement. And if it ain't going to be DeSantis, the field's getting real narrow. We'll be back. Cool. And hi, chat room. Yeah, watch your state houses. That's true. I'm more worried about Senate and House Republicans, as we should. Let's see, grab you back in here. Who's next in line, Christy? Yeah, well, that's the thing. Right now, there's an argument that either Chris Christie or what's his name? Trump's CIA, Pompeo. Pompeo thinks he's going to be the dark horse. He's going to roll in and be the tough guy who was smarter than Trump, but colder than Trump. He's going to be, Trump's the Mike Tyson, and I'm the John Wick. That's what he's going to pull. I'm quiet, and I just get the job done. Well, I mean, obviously, John Wick is a terrible example of that because it's noisy as shit. But whatever. You get my point. He's going to argue that. He's going to argue that yeah. Yes, Pompeo. That's why he lost all that weight, Templeton. He put it off. He said he's not running, but that doesn't mean he doesn't roll in later. Third party, no. Trump, and if Trump runs third party, that's that. Because there's a bigger chance Trump will run third party than Manchin will, or that no labels will have anybody besides RFK and Marianne Williamson running together or some shit, or Vivek Ramaswamy running with RFK. Like, get out of here. If Trump runs third party, I'm gonna have a party. Yes, we'll all have a party. You like Christie? It's funny.
Stand by, coming back.
Thank you. As New Jersey governors go.
Joe Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
So, welcome back to the show. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito. 773-763-9278 is our number. Now, I live stream every day. I do my Saturday show on WCPT with my dear friend Johnny Million. You can watch him at twitch.tv/Johnny Million a couple days a week as he plays music and does stuff that, when in a normal society, we're all about doing. There's so much of what we experience politically that, especially during the Trump years, where we were white knuckling our government the entire time, where it's just like you wake up every morning, like, what has this guy ruined? What is he going to try? What normal thing that we all took for granted is this guy going to try and throw a monkey wrench into? And ultimately, what it was the Supreme Court. The rest of it was just window dressing. All the other stuff, all the noise was just to make his base howl for things that, by the way, he couldn't do or pass. But ultimately, those Supreme Court seats were the thing. That's why they, evangelicals still support him. He's the guy who got rid of Roe v. Wade. That's enough for them. He deserves 4 more years, even if he burns the place down. And again, they believe he's their pit bull, and they don't care if he shakes the baby, just as long as he's there to bite and bark at the people they don't like who might try to enter the yard. And that they're cool with that. All their ethics, all their morals, all their ideology out the window for that one particular thing, because he solved it. He was the imperfect vessel for the perfect vessel of God's love, and that's what they believe, and that's what they're going to stick to. And they are going to sell that the Biden administration wants to kill babies after they've been born, which is weird, because technically speaking, that's the death penalty or flat-out murder, which are still illegal. The murder's still illegal under the Biden administration, and the Biden administration is cool with the moratorium on federal death sentence, but the red states aren't. The ones that are supposed to be rosy red, happy, clappy, Christian-y states somehow That thou shalt not kill thing is kind of, well, is obviously an asterisk up on the top. So the question is, how much more damage can this Supreme Court do? And what I would, on the one hand, quite a bit. However, there is a ceiling on it. And that ceiling is their ability to maintain the power of the court. Now, they've been banging up against that ceiling lately, and they've maybe even put some cracks in it. But so far, they have not breached it in a way that, where the outlandish rulings that go against the tide of public opinion is in contrast, or is, well, I guess in parallel to the graft that, say, Clarence Thomas has been getting, or Alito have been getting, or these sweetheart deals and sweetheart trips and free rent and millionaire yacht trips and yada yada, all that stuff that they've been getting right now, currently, insofar as we know, and to the extent that they can prove that court choices went one way or another, they have gone on parallel tracks, two tracks of awful going in the same direction, but not crossing the streams, but running in parallel. At some point, however, the expectation is, and will be, at least from the people who are treating someone like this to a sweetheart deal, that those two tracks will cross, that they will require a choice that they would not have otherwise made but for the money that they were getting. Those two things. That's the quid pro quo that is expected of someone if you're bothering to pay them to do something that they would not otherwise do, or I suppose giving them the expectation of a reward, because there very well may be, in the case of Clarence Thomas and others, that these were not direct bribes, that this was not pay to go to reward the donor, a win that goes against what they believe. It is simply a thank you gift, a reward on the other side of this. There's a problem, though, because that's just as unethical and definitely as illegal as paying someone in the first place, because now you plant the expectation of behavior in the court, and therefore their judgment in future may ride on whether or not they get another gift. And that in and of itself is effectively a baited bribe. You like this? There's more where this came from. That's where that's why, in classic bribery schemes, that's why you hear that. There's more where this came from. And that's arguably one of the driving forces behind Clarence Thomas and his choices, and it would seem. Now, there very well may be cases that have happened for the Supreme Court that he had more weight than he should have had, and that he directed, and that benefited specifically, one of these folks. And he might have just been outnumbered at the time in his attempt to either undermine it, put in a dissent that would eventually be used in court, in a favorable court around that person, and then they would fight it back up to the Supreme Court, hoping, waiting until they get it turned around. And then they basically just get a refund on whatever money or rights or whatever they thought they were denied at the time. That's not out of the question either. But we have currently a situation where those parallel tracks are obvious. They're cleanly, in view, I think, for any American to look at that wants to look at them. Obviously, the sycophant maggot supporters of Donald Trump are going to see them totally different than any other person who actually looks at stuff like that on the merits. But let's just say, if you have the ability to discern reality, you'll be able to look at these things and say, it's obviously hinky. He's getting these trips, that Clarence Thomas is getting these trips, and that if any other members of the Supreme Court are getting these things, obviously a problem. We should do something about that. And then on the other side of it, they're making some decisions that seem to reward a certain political belief system as opposed to the Constitution or the support of it themselves, and that they seem to be lying about, they seem to be putting the lie to their own hearings where they said, I believe in settled law. I believe that, for example, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, those kind of things. Once they, it shows them to be the torpedoes that they actually were. And so that increasingly will become a struggle for the Supreme Court. It'll be a struggle for right-wing Supreme Court nominees in the future. Anybody added afterwards is going to face more scrutiny if they're put in by a Republican about that. The question is, will Democrats have the votes to be able to push back against that? Heck, will the Susan Sarandon brigade find a way to successfully hand the presidency to Trump or one of his ilk again, so that they can get even more people in there as liberals age out, or as they, as if we expand the court and they're able to take the reins and do something like that. But in contrast, the story that the Republicans constantly bring up is the Hunter Biden laptop and 10% for the big guy and money made and the quid pro quo, and China bought Biden's influence, and they sold out America for China. Okay, first of all, let's be abundantly clear. None of these people seem to be able to point to any policy that actually benefited China. The only one that I've even heard them come close to was James Comer, the Kentucky Republican, who saw the FD 1023 form, that is the crucial piece of evidence, which is not an evidence, it's just it's a memo of an allegation. Let's be abundantly clear. If FD 1023s were evidence, you wouldn't even need court cases anymore. They could just do it. Anyways, by the way, the person who did that FD 1023 is either Rudy Giuliani or one of his associates specifically. It was Andre Durkash, Rudy himself, or somebody working for both or either of them. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Lev Parnas. But it is very clear, again, to see those sort of parallel tracks in the Supreme Court. But the attempt by Republicans right now is to cross the tracks of Hunter Biden worked for Burisma and worked for Rosemont Seneca, and they were an investment firm. And those investment funds were curtailed and bent towards Joe Biden to get him to change some sort of U.S. policy to benefit the people giving the money. And the one area where Comer seems to think he has an aha is that the money that was given to, allegedly, to the Bidens, one of the signs he says that they acted on it was getting rid of the China project, the anti-China, I don't know, forget the name of it even at this point, that Trump had put in to go after intellectual property theft and at universities and businesses in the United States, where Chinese citizens were coming over, going to school, working in labs, stealing technology, and they were, and giving it to the Chinese government, to the Chinese military and the like. And that the Biden, the Trump administration, obviously in response to COVID largely, but also in, around his trade deal idea and to push back against some of his own voters going, why aren't you doing anything? Created this program, which really just went after Chinese students for being Chinese. It was not narrowly focused and smart investigation policy. It was just look at anybody who's Chinese who's visiting and going to school here or doing business here with side eye, and see if you can catch them doing something. Just basically a papers please law, which is the kind of slapdash hammers and crayon stuff that the Trump organization loves to do. The Trump administration, and then his own campaign, and then his own party or his business, whatever. It's big, broad strokes of idiocy. But the Biden administration just simply dropped the name. They continued to pursue any theft of intellectual property in the United States. They have continued to bring cases against people who have done that. They simply just dropped the name of this program because it sounded racist, and it indeed was. That it was just broad-based, aimed at anyone who was Chinese in the country, including, by the way, Chinese dissidents who were trying to get out of the country, which, by the way, by following them around and making life difficult for them, actually gave the Chinese Communist Party a predicate for insisting that they come home, or bringing them home, or harassing them, saying that you're not going to find any safety here if you try to, defect away from this program. So that's the one thing. A program where Biden apparently took billions and millions and millions and billions of dollars from the Chinese to change the name of an investigation, but keep the heart of the investigation and the content of it alive. That's it. That's the whole thing. Did we sell military secrets to the Chinese? No. Did we allow them to have any technology that would put their military ahead? Nope. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. The CHIPS Act, all by itself, has effectively set back China's military and their technological sector at a decade at minimum. Something Trump, by the way, could have done, but never did. Let's be abundantly clear about that. 773-763-9278 is our number. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in for Joan Esposito. Trump could have gotten us out of Afghanistan during COVID. One of the best excuses to pull your troops and your personnel out is a worldwide pandemic. Sorry, we got to bring everybody home. But he didn't, because he never had any intention of doing it. The tariff fight with China, turns out it was just a way for the Chinese to funnel Trump some direct cash to buy farmers in an area of the country that he was losing, while giving his daughter some trademarks and some other stuff. No skin off their nose. They were going to buy the food anyways. They need it. China imports 80% of their food. You think Trumpies know that in general? We got to take a break. We'll be back after this. I'm Hal Sparks, filling in for Joan Esposito on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk, 773-763-9278. Oh, it was almost perfect. It was almost perfect. I rolled right up to that 30. Oh, man. I saw Biden as a centrist corporate Democrat. It wasn't my first choice until Trump made it. Again, and I mean no disrespect in this 250K ohm. Define corporate Democrat. Centrist, I kind of get in that. I mean, left of center. Again, populist. Centrist is what people call populist when they're afraid to call the center populist or popular. What do you mean? What do you mean corporate? Because I hear that a lot. Corporate Dem, I get it. And even Manchin, like, again, Manchin's a West Virginia Democrat. Cinema, and again, not their names, what it means. What it actually means. Free market Democrat. Yeah, no, he's not a free market Democrat. That not by any measure. Biden's not a corporate Democrat. He's a realistic. He knows what he can do and what he can't. Right. Biden is the Rodney Dangerfield of politicians. He gets no respect. Right. No, and like I said, 250K home. I mean, this is no respect. I just hear that phrase a lot, but I don't know. They take corporate money. Okay, that's not enough though, because again, if TYT's incorporated. If they give a lot of airtime to Sanders, they're not giving him cash, but is that a contribution in kind if they're trying to tear down his opponent? Is that not a corporation supporting him in that regard? Coal baron. Okay, so the idea that Manchin's a coal baron is different. Corporate Dems are the lapdogs of the oligarchs. That still doesn't tell me what they do. Again, that is Trucker John. That is 3 pieces of jargon. Help me out here. I'm speaking honestly. I'm trying to flesh this out. Corporate Dem, bailing out your rich cronies, classmates, through government funding. Like who? Kelly. I mean, because was the American Rescue Package, was that a corporate Dem thing to do, or was that him bailing out the electorate? Bernie isn't funded by corporations. No, he's supported by them, though. And you could argue that the DNC is incorporated and he used them as a super PAC. No, guys, I know when you say Manchin and Cinema, that doesn't tell me. That tells me you think they're corporate Dems. That doesn't tell me what you mean by corporate Dem. Let's see. Democrats, to some extent, must take corporate money in our environment. You can't bring a knife to a gunfight. This is true. Corporate Democrat is one that sells their leftist ideals out for money. Okay. How does Biden do that? Is he just, because I would argue he's realistic about what he can actually accomplish. And what do you call a leftist who sells out their ideals for an all or nothing approach to litigation or legislation?
20 seconds.
Oh, gift and disc. Oh, thanks. Sorry, somebody says Steph chat. Oh, thank you. Yes, I will put that in for the sign. That's great.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
So I was asking this of our chat room, and I'm asking this, by the way, in good faith. I'm not asking this as, to just rawly pick a fight. I'm trying to figure out what people mean by their direct pejoratives in certain situations, because I feel I'm pretty anti-jargon as best I can. And I find that you lose a lot of arguments because you think jargon gets you over the line. And one of the things I hear a lot as a criticism of certain Dems versus others is the idea of a corporate Democrat. And a corporate Democrat would be, apparently the definition has bridged, from what I can see in our chat room, of good people who I adore, by the way, at infotainmentwars.com or on twitch.tv/HalSparks or on my Facebook page, that it can mean anything from any Democrat that takes corporate money, no matter what that corporation is, by the way. If it's Raytheon or Starbucks or a small chain of restaurants in their district, if they take that money to buy ads, that makes them a corporate Democrat. No matter the size of that corporation, or whether or not, by the way, they do what that corporation wants them to do, simply taking that money makes them a corporate Democrat. And yes, and part of my argument would be, and then there's another, the farthest end is somebody said they use government money. A corporate Democrat is somebody who uses government money to bail out their buddies at the expense of the taxpayer. Now, a lot of that language specifically has been hanging around since the 2008 bailout. And it was a lot of, if you'll recall, both Obama and Biden caught a lot of that stuff that were called that a lot because of the bailouts in particular. But I remind everybody that not only are electric cars a real thing now because of how the Obama-Biden administration structured the bailout, but also the U.S. taxpayer made money on the bailout. Ultimately, we were paid back more money than it cost us, even with the losses. So if they're taking corporate money, then I guess so are the taxpayers at this point. Everyone who was for that. Okay. So, and then the other question, of course, being by contrast, what's a corporate Republican? If there's a corporate Democrat, are there any Republicans that aren't corporate Republicans? Is that just a automatic? Because there seem to be religious Republicans who kind of don't care about business, or at least sell that idea, whether they do or not or whatever, but they seem to do stuff for ideological reasons, even if it hurts their constituents and hurts businesses in the area or what have you. We'll see. And that would be where they outlaw, the freedom of choice in their state, or attempt to, and drive business from the state. No matter how much money that, look at DeSantis's attack on Disney, look at Georgia Republicans' attack on a woman's right to choose, driving some production out of the state and that kind of thing. Robert in our chat says, corporate Dems equals sellout. Okay, that's great, but that's another piece of jargon in exchange for that jargon. So I want to work this out because I think it's important. I think it's, I think this is a distinction worth saying. And in, one of the ideas that, especially as Biden being as pro-union as he is, for example, and unions have built more strength in the last couple of years than they've had in the previous decade. And it's no small feat because no small impact by the Biden administration that he's so vociferously praising unions and believes in them and believes they should have the ability to have their say. So while at the same time, that does not mean going back to like some sort of 1930s view of, union bosses kneecapping people to, as a front for the mafia or some idiocy. So genuine unions that reflect the needs of The workers, that's the idea. So there, this is, one of those phrases that I don't, if people are going to use it as a shorthand, I just want to be clear what they're talking about, because it seems to me an unsolvable position. If you have a pejorative you use against someone or a group of people that you are against, for example, and you use that pejorative, to decry them, and yet the lack of definition of what that pejorative means means it's almost impossible for them to avoid the label. Therefore, does the label have any value? And I would argue that it does not. Connie Kelly saying, corporate Democrats believe that helping corporations helps people. If corporations are doing good, people will be reaping the benefits. Remember, the business of America is business. I don't think that qualifies as corporate Democrat. I think that's just a reality of sort of the business in the country. I don't think they're doing it at the excuse of people. That's one of the reasons why Democrats created OSHA, for example. That there's one thing to believe that business, and it is how everyone makes a living and feeds themselves this way. Yeah, Biden made Bernie the chairman of the budget committee. Yes, right. He would hardly do that if his I guess his linear view of what a Democrat can be is somehow corporate support. So, I would argue, yes, and Fire Resist says Reaganomics was a scam. Trickle down does not work. Biden is changing that. Exactly. And I would say that if you were going to call somebody to be a corporate Democrat, to me, it would mean that they believe in trickle down economics. They would have to still believe in trickle down. That is the methodology, because corporations first as the prime mover would make you, that you believe that simply by satisfying the needs of corporations, it will automatically solve all the other issues. That's what trickle down effectively was. I don't know a single Democrat, even Manchin or Sinema, who believes that. And again, somebody, Elliot's going, corrupt Democrat? See, that's fine. If somebody's a corrupt Democrat and you can point to their corruption, cool. That gets us closer to what we're talking about. Corruption is something you could do something about. If anybody who deals with corruption, is suddenly a corporate Democrat, then anybody who works for a corporation is part of the corruption. Therefore, if anybody in the audience works for any kind of incorporated entity, and that's almost everyone, unless you're you stitch things on Etsy, it's just it's a doom loop language-wise. Yeah, Connie said corporate Democrats still want some limitations on corporations. That's a good way of putting it, but I would argue that's what keeps them from being a corporate Dem. And I'm talking to our chat room right now, but we're also taking calls 773-763-9278. I'm filling in for Joan, and I've only got a little bit of time left, but I wanted to cover this because I really do think it's important that we lean back from the jargon. PHKO is saying, Hal, please explain to them the Citizens United was overturned. The Dems have no choice but to work with corporations. That is true. You will lose the advertising battle. You will lose the ability to raise money. You will absolutely be outspent and what have you. That has less effect now than at any time in history. And fewer people decide who they're going to vote for based on ads on television than almost any time in our history. And the internet being what it is, and the cost of making an ad is so much cheaper nowadays that that even Citizens United, you don't even need the corporate money the way you used to fund a campaign. And you can argue that Trump's idea that he artificially, funded his campaign, that he self-funded, was largely based on the fact that regular media channels as far as running ads and stuff was less necessary, in this day and age. And that is true. So what I want to be, clear about is not so much that you can't have a problem with a Democrat that takes too much money from corporate interests and sides with them over their constituents, the American people, or their own Democratic Party base. That's not my point. The point is that if you broadly use a phrase like corporate dem too much, it loses any meaning it might have had. Honest to God, it has zero value at this point. If everybody except the purists are corporate dems, then I got news for you. Sooner or later, your purist examples are going to become corporate dems to you, because all they have to do is have local businesses do fundraisers for them, and they're suddenly corporate. It's the irony of this is that this all started, the corporate dem slam started from Republicans trying to drive a wedge between Democrats and their voters. It's very much like what we talked about early in last hour with one of the callers, where he's saying this is something, that what the Russians do is they get you into the whataboutism movement, and that is absolutely the case. The Republicans have learned that lesson a long time ago. It is in one of the stories that's in the news today about how they're trying to use Muslim Americans to drive a wedge between the society or Democrats and the transgender movement. And they know that. They don't care about it, but they know it's useful. They only care about it to the extent that they can use it as a cudgel. And this is the same thing. Yes, TYT says corporate dems constantly. So much so that it means nothing materially. And therefore, I don't even know how it works as a pejorative at some point, except as a catch-all. And so if you're just using it as a catch-all for everybody who ain't you, aren't you really just arguing against the side that you're supposed to be arguing for, period? We got to take a break. We'll come back with the last segment of the show. This is the Joan Esposito Show. I'm Hal Sparks. I'm filling in today. I'm not doing my regular live stream after this because I did it kind of early. I hope my regular viewers understand and could just roll back and enjoy this. If you want to watch it from the top, knock yourself out. Hope so. Anyways, and a great 4th of July to you. We'll be back right after this. I guess that makes you a corporate rhino, Wes. Well, that's, interestingly enough, you can argue both parties suck, someone gets left in the cracks. Well, problem is, Be the Messiah, everybody gets left in it. No one scoops up everybody. No group. If there were 10 parties, there would still be people left in the cracks, because there'd still be people insisting they are not a part of any party. And the bifurcation amongst them would simply be a labeled version of the bifurcations in and amongst the Democratic Party, be it progressive Dems and the Black Congressional Caucus and other folks, or on the right side, the Freedom Caucus and you're kind of business or religious conservatives, tradcons, traditional conservatives. What's the difference between that and other parties, except that they kind of group together into one bigger group because on their own 10 different groups are just too small to work this out. Yes, corporate dem is lazy speech. I agree. Well, that's fine, Dawn, but I don't wish ill on anybody. Sorry, just it's a rule I have. Thanks, Big Stefan. People on both sides kind of suck. Find the good ones. Yeah, but that's true of people, though. Regardless of whether they're on a side. I vote with TIT, which means a day late. Yeah. I think the pejorative use means they talk like a Democrat, but fundraise like a Republican. Well, how do they legislate? And how can you talk like a Democrat?
Back in 10 seconds.
Thank you. How can you talk like a Democrat if you, say, signed on to bills like a Republican, for example? You have to deliver, right?
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
The irony in the conversation that I think we're having in the chat room, and I think it's a valuable one. I really do. And I think it's kind of silly that people sometimes use their labels in the face of this no labels nonsense that's going around to get to the front of the line. Famously, Mike Lindell. Mike Lindell's pillow company did better than some simply because he wore a cross in his ads. And by wearing a small gold cross on his lapel, a certain group within the the consumer base automatically flocked to buying his pillows based solely on that. They thought, this man is wearing the right gang sign for me. And so in that, he got a lot of business based just on the symbolism of what he was there to do, whether he acts that way or not. Now, as a former addict, his behavior has been previously unchristian or whatever, but everyone gets to find their own way to salvation, and I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum, but I will say that his behavior around Donald Trump's big lie and his support of Donald Trump and his kind of what I would call bearing false witness about many, many people is antithetical to those alleged Christian beliefs. But he got right to the front of the line because he labeled himself the right thing. He put the right symbol on, and people jumped at it. There is an inverse of that as well, where people will take the name progressive, for example. And I think, as somebody who's been on Chicago's Progressive Talk for over a decade, that to me, being a true progressive means notching progress and it sticks. That you are creating rungs in the ladder where there may not have been before, and they maintain, they stay, so that when you're long gone, people can still climb that ladder. That's what, to me, that's what a progressive idea is. That it has to have staying power. It has to benefit people regardless of whether I agree with them or not in their base life experience. And I believe that there are a bunch of people who, I guess, don't think that. And they believe that unless it's, that there is no ladder, that unless it is a catapult that flings you over, through the goal posts, and that's that, and it's all over, and it requires no more work, there are no increments to it at all. It just happens all at once. I would argue that nothing ever happens that way. Nothing in your entire life has ever happened that way. Not if you have children that you have raised, if you have grown your hair, if you have lost or gained weight, if you have learned to drive or operate a screw gun, driving a stick shift or an automatic. I learned the internet. Think of anything that genuinely impacted your life, and it took time. It took focus. And where there were setbacks, you just kept at it. You didn't fight with the stick shift. You didn't fight with math. You reached an agreement with it. You found the parts you understood and you worked with them immediately. You found the parts that you didn't understand and you made an attempt to fix that. That's always and every time how real progress is made. Every time. I don't care who you are. And anybody who says that things are going to be solved quickly is often selling something. And so you'll find that I often refer to, in terms of a democracy anyways, revolution, and talk of a revolution, is the 6-minute abs of democracy. You ever see those ads? Lose weight while you sleep. Get abs in 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Just get this device, and suddenly you'll have a six-pack. That's not how it works. Even if the thing works, it works in 6 minutes a day. Every single day. You know what 6 minutes 6-minute abs means? It means instead of 30 minutes a day, 6 minutes a day. That's what it means. That's the whole point. That's their sales pitch. So I have to say, anybody who decries incrementalism, believes that there is not a ladder that requires maintenance and securing it and support, has no interest in the destination that the ladder goes to in the first place, and is lying to you if they say otherwise. And if they're on the right, I don't care. It's not my business. Fox is a fraud. Newsmax is a fraud. OAN is a fraud. RSBN's a fraud. Half the people there don't believe a single word they're saying, and the other half are too stupid to know any better and want you to believe that they're experts when they're absolutely not, which is its own form of idiocy. I can only care about us. When we lose things, when we lose legislative or Supreme Court battles, that's not on anybody else. That's not on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's not on even Mitch McConnell. It's on us every single time. Because I got to tell you, kids, Biden won in a landslide by pulling in people that ain't the extremes. What the extremes brought us was 50-50 in the Senate and a slight hedge by Republicans in the House. That's what that kind of thought control brings. Not thought control, but like control by that kind of thought brings. If we are all enslaved by the extremists and nobody, wants to move that ball forward because for fear that somebody will yell at them for not, I guess, throwing a Hail Mary pass every time the ball snaps, throw a Hail Mary pass. That's all. You'll never win a game, you'll never get to the Super Bowl, and you're never gonna actually matter. SCOTUS is on us. These losses this week happened years ago. They didn't happen because Biden didn't fight. They didn't even happen because Dems didn't fight. They happened because, particularly in 2016, about 75,000 voters went, I don't know. And in many ways, it also happened because when, in 2001, about 1999 into 2000, a bunch of would-be Gore voters went, I don't know, that other guy, I could have a beer with him. That's when those fights are had. That's when those fights are, and again, I don't like using the word fight. It's silly. But that's when the decision was made. And so decrying or getting angry about decisions made hence is embarrassing. And in my mind, I find it unethical. I find it morally wrong to offshore our own moral failings, our own shortcomings onto someone else, especially a singular person in a democracy, is no different than the people who line up at Trump's rallies to watch the sun shine out of his backside. It is up to us to secure those rungs and to make sure they're steady and solid enough for those that come after us. That's progress. That's what being a progressive is. Not, whining about the a lack of utopian fixes for things that are either tested and failed or never tested. And certainly not a point where they've actually been able to convince a majority of people in any circumstance, not a city, not a town, not a county, not a Canadian province, nothing, that this is how you get it done. And we're going to live like this for a while to prove it. One of the repeating problems that I see on our side of the aisles are people like Richard Wolff showing up on Tom Hartman's show talking about democracy in the workplace, which I believe is the name of his show, and saying this is, that American corporations don't want you to do this, and the government doesn't want you to do this, and they hate it, and the corporate American. I got news for you. Nothing, not a thing is stopping you in the U.S. from forming a co-op and running your business that way. Have at it. But until you do, and you do a proof of concept on your own, at the very least, stop calling the people who are just living inside a system that you benefit from evil, and get on with securing the rungs to make people's lives better every single day in every area that you can. I'm Hal Sparks. I've been filling in for Joan Esposito. I want to thank everybody in Chicago, the callers we had today, and everybody in the chat room. I'm not going to be doing a post show on my regular streaming channel, so apologies, guys, because it's a holiday day, and I'm already on longer than usual today. Anyway, so everybody, take care of yourself. I will see you guys. I will be having a show on my stream tomorrow on Tuesday. So see you guys again. Take care of yourself and take care of somebody else. And thanks, Chicago.
Thanks, Hal.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we clear?
Yep, you're clear.
All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you again. Be well. And tell Joan I said hi and give her a hug for me when you see her. Cool. All right. And thank you guys, especially. Let me get out of this and clear. So, so I'm not going to do a post show. I'm going to, because I got to go take my mom and my kid out to shopping for something. Enjoy your hot dogs. Thank you. Yes. Without buns. Yes, in Slava Ukraine. We'll be covering a bunch of stuff. I will be on tomorrow for 4th of July. We'll be doing a regular show in the afternoon just for the fun of it, if that's cool. Because it's so hot to here that, that period of time, 3 to 5 o'clock my time, it's all right to be inside. No problem, Andrea. Take care of yourself. It's okay. Appreciate it. And big hugs to you guys, and I will see you guys later on. Is that cool? Is that cool? Cool. Thank you, Big Steph fan. And I don't want to make anybody grind their teeth about that whole corporate dem thing. I just want to make sure we're all on the same. If you're using jargon, it's good that we agree on what the word actually means. Because if it just becomes a catch-all, then it loses any meaning and any impact it might have. And if it isn't functional to talk about something we're dealing with, then it is a waste of words. And we're not moving anywhere closer. So tomorrow's 0. No, I'm going to be on tomorrow. So, just a regular afternoon show. And that's important. Can you open this jargon? Yes. No, I am Diagram. I am going to be on tomorrow. I will. She'd watch it later. They're behind, whoever they are behind. Okay, so anyways, much love, and I will see you guys tomorrow. And this time, I'm not going to do a quick cutoff. I'm not going to do a thing.